Okay, today is Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. This is a regular city council meeting. Happy New Year to everyone. Oh, and then I just lost my agenda. No. Okay, it's still, and I'm calling the meeting to order. Can we have and giving notice to the general public and to the city council that at this regular meeting, the city council may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for discussion and consultation with the city's attorneys for legal advice on any item listed on the following agenda. Now can we have roll call?
Mayor Daggett,
Here.
Vice Mayor Sweet,
Here.
Councilmember Aslan,
Here.
Councilmember Garcia,
Present.
Councilmember House,
Here.
Councilmember Matthews,
Here.
Councilmember Spence.
Here.
All right. Councilmember Spence, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Councilmember Matthews, would you read our mission statement?
It would be my honor. The mission of the City of Flagstaff is to protect and enhance the quality of life for all.
Thank you. And Councilmember House, would you read our land acknowledgement?
Thank you, Mayor. The Flagstaff City Council humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by Native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you. Next up, item number 4 is an open call to the public. This enables the public to address council about anything that is not on tonight's agenda. And because the items talked to us about aren't on the agenda, we cannot respond to you. So I am going to call up Colleen Mering.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm Colleen Mering. I'm the Chief Legal Counsel and Chief People Officer for Northern Arizona Healthcare. Thank you for having us as usual. I'm afraid I do not have an update on our new campus. We continue in our listening phase and information gathering, and we will be back when we do have news we can share. Last meeting, I updated you on our phenomenal infection prevention results and recognition from the Department of Health Services, and today I wanted to talk about another hot topic that we're really proud of our progress in, which is staffing, recruitment and retention in particular. Recruiting is particularly challenging in healthcare right now. Becker's Hospital Review just announced that they're anticipating 100,000 doctor shortage just in 2025 and 78,000 RN, registered nurse shortage for calendar year 2025 across the country. And unfortunately, that shortage is expected to worsen as more folks retire and leave the profession. We're not educating enough to bring on. So our goal is to bring people here and keep them here, make them longtime members of our communities so that we have the services and the resources here to care for our citizens when they need care here in Flagstaff and across Northern Arizona. So in 2024, we made 796 external hires, meaning new to Northern Arizona healthcare. Some of those people relocated here, some of them are local community members. We have partnerships with the high schools and community colleges and universities locally to help educate and train in through that whole workforce pipeline. So once we get them here, we have to keep them. And so we're really focused on retention within the first year of service because the data shows if you can keep somebody through that first year, you're much more likely to keep them long term. You have this huge drop off if you can't really get them bought into your culture and workplace. In January of 2024, we were losing 20% of our new hires in the first year of service, and we've reduced that to 15% as of December. So on a rolling 12-month basis, we made a 5% improvement, and we need to do that again and keep doing that. We're still hiring. There's sometimes a misconception about that. We hear new grads, especially from local high schools and community colleges, say, oh, it's hard to find a job. We're trying to put ourselves out there and let everybody know we will hire you, we will train you. We want you to be a member of our workforce and of the city of Flagstaff or a Northern Arizona community for many years to come. We hope to see many of you at our tour on Thursday morning or our open house in the afternoon at the new primary care clinic, and we look forward to talking more about that next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. All right, next up, item number 5, proclamations and recognitions. We have a proclamation for Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and I believe we have some people in the audience, and we also have at least one person online. Okay. All right, and we have Michelle online. Flagstaff, both a tourist destination and rural community, is uniquely affected by human trafficking, which includes both sex and labor exploitation crimes. The same economic forces that have shaped Flagstaff also inadvertently contribute to human trafficking crimes, a thriving tourism industry, limited affordable housing, and a geographic location that limits access to services and resources. A lack of awareness of how trafficking crimes present within a community of this size and geographic position has also been a contributing factor. The biggest misconception is that trafficking is something that happens in larger cities or overseas. Local and federal law enforcement has indicated that sex trafficking is happening in Arizona at an alarming rate. The income potential and the use of technology are among reasons why the crime is prevalent. Profit from sex trafficking is a billion-dollar business, second only to illegal arms trafficking and the illicit drug trade. Sex trafficking is a high-profit, low-risk business where the commodity, human beings, can be sold repeatedly, unlike drugs or weapons where the product can only be sold one time. For any business to survive, it requires supply and demand. There appears to be an unwavering demand fueled by easy access through the internet and a ready supply of both adults and youth that are constantly being recruited and exploited. Since 2018, agencies in the Flagstaff community have come into contact with over 462 victims. Through various law enforcement investigations, a demand for the purchase of commercial sex has been identified in the region that fuels these crimes. Flagstaff Initiative Against Trafficking, or FIAT, is a community collective of professional service providers who want to end human trafficking. The goals of FIAT are to construct a unified response for trafficking victims and survivors to get out of the life safely, educate and to bring awareness to our community on human trafficking in order to drive down demand and to collect data to determine the true impact of human trafficking in Flagstaff. Now, therefore, I, Becky Daggett, Mayor of the City of Flagstaff, do hereby proclaim January 2025 as Flagstaff Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month. Michelle, please say a few words if you'd like.
She can't. Michelle, if you would like to say a few words, you're more than welcome to.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mayor and Council. My name is Michelle Rucker, and I'm the Director of Human Trafficking Services at Northland Family Help Center, as well as serving as Chair of the Flagstaff Initiative Against Trafficking. And I just really quickly wanted to express gratitude on behalf of Fiat for the city's commitment to the work being done by our coalition. I really want to highlight specifically Police Chief Connolly and Shannon Anderson in the city manager's office. They both have gone above and beyond to support this work being done for, well, Chief Connolly just a few months now, but Shannon Anderson for many years in our work here in the community. So I do want to say that because of this, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we're at in terms of progress in addressing this issue, and really having made the strides that we have to support survivors and to hold traffickers accountable here in our community. We do have a few events as well here in January for Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month that I would like to just extend an invitation to you all, Mayor and Council, as well as to the general public. We do have a documentary screening occurring on January 23rd that will be highlighting survivor stories of human trafficking and exploitation, which will be followed up by a Q&A with local survivor leaders here in the community. So details for that can be found on our social media pages, either the Northland Family Help Center page or the Flagstaff Initiative Against Trafficking page. Both Facebook and Instagram. We also have a Fiat meeting, which is our quarterly meeting occurring on January 27th at Flagstaff Medical Center at 2:30 p.m., which is also open to the public. And then following that meeting, a pint night at Mother Road Brewing to raise funds for the Flagstaff Initiative Against Trafficking, and all are welcome to any of those events. Thank you so much for your support.
First of all, Anthony, I think you jinxed me. You asked if I ever got shocked by this. I just did. But I had a question. I know we've been working on the Cease City status, and I wondered if there was an update on where we are with that.
Thank you, Council Member. Thank you for that wonderful proclamation, Mayor and Council. It is a work in progress, but it's good progress to note. I don't have exact numbers. I do know that the program has been integrated into our NeoGov platform, and we can have a more specific update in the near future to let you know where we are in the percentage of employees that have taken that. But I will generalize by saying it's been a very good progress thus far.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving down to item number 6, council liaison reports, and I will start with Councilmember Matthews.
I have nothing to report, thank you.
Councilmember Aslan.
Well, it's been a slow couple of weeks, something I'm sure we've all enjoyed. A couple weeks ago, the Sustainability Commission did meet, and I was just pulling this up when you called on me very quickly. They put together they drafted a letter to the members, the city planning staff, and the members of the, for input for the 2045 Flagstaff Regional Plan. It's a six-page letter. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I do encourage all of you on council to go back and look at that. Looks like it came in on December 19th. I do just want to highlight one thing towards the end where they talked about language that they suggest needs to be added for clear support for the following. Remove mandatory parking minimums, underutilized parking lot conversions, sustainable and equitable active transportation, clean rail infrastructure. These are things to keep in mind, by the way, as we have our legislative conversation later as well. Nature-based solutions and green infrastructure, water quality on emerging contaminants, climate justice integration, and climate resilient housing. And one last one, healthy regenerative economy. So a lot of good, thoughtful work went into this by members of our citizenry and our commission. Hope all of you can at least peruse it and take a look at that. I know our city staff will be looking at that extensively. Also, tomorrow with the Tourism Commission, we're having our fiscal year 26 priorities, objectives, and tactics collaboration retreat that's happening at the Embassy Suites. It's from 2 to 10, and I will be there for that. More to report later. Nothing much to report from the Coconino Plateau Water Advisory Council. We met at the beginning of December, but we usually meet at the end of the month, so it's kind of our annual 2-month break between December and January. More to report on that in early February.
Vice Mayor Sweet.
Thank you. I do have a couple of updates. With Metro Plan, we did elect a new chair and vice chair. So I am officially the chair of Metro Plan, and Judy Begay is the vice chair. That's pretty exciting. We have a meeting this Thursday here in council chambers at 1 p.m. The Water Commission has been working on information regarding the reclaimed water rate, and we formed a small working group and have a report coming to council soon. BPAC was presented with an executive summary of the draft Land Use Plan 2024. It was a great discussion highlighting aspects that relate to the Beautification Arts and Science program. And last, I took a tour of the progress with the Downtown Connection Center, and it is really coming along and will be such a great asset for Flagstaff. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. At the December meeting for the Housing Commission, commissioners were engaging in a dot voting activity to suggest agenda items and topics to address this year. The goal was really to solicit commissioner recommendations and suggestions for advancing the work of the commission and ensure that topics of interest or concern to commissioners are addressed. It was a really great activity from my perspective because of some other ongoing conversations, but really just to ensure that they remember that their voices are important to bring forward on those different topics. Commissioners were also updated on the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant process and application ranking, and I believe that will be coming back to them soon to potentially engage in that process. For the Commission on Diversity Awareness, there was a reminder of the upcoming MLK Day commemoration on January 20th. That will be led by the NAU Black Student Union. I believe a request for a proclamation should be coming forward soon, but I will go ahead because I think we're kind of running out of time to put that on our radar for hopefully a proclamation next week. The Commission also received updates on the Municipal Equality Index scorecard for 2024. I won't spoil that because I know we're having an update on that at the end of the month. There were also updates on the anti-camping ordinance and the Rainbow Pavement Exhibit project from Flagstaff Pride. So a lot of good, robust conversations on those things, as well as some questions about library programming that I believe we're going to circle back to and have more conversation on that as well. And that's it for me.
Thank you. The Commission on Inclusion and Adaptive Living has created an accessibility expedition working group, and it is to take members of the public out to various areas and walk, roll, various mobility. It's to see where we are lacking in infrastructure that allows for greater mobility for more people in our community. Their next meeting is January 16th at 7 p.m. It's a Zoom meeting, And then the next commission meeting is January 21st, and those meetings are from 11 to 1, and you can access them online or in person. All right. So let's move on to item number 7, liquor license public hearings. I am going to open the public hearing, and we will have a staff presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Georgiana Stasky, Deputy City Clerk. Before you today is a liquor license application for a new application of a Series 12 restaurant license for El Tapatio 9, located at 2004 East Historic Route 66. The agent on the application is Jose Manuel Gutierrez Hernandez, with owners Jose Manuel Gutierrez Hernandez, Leticia Gutierrez, and Ashley Espinoza Tarlo handling the day-to-day operations. The Police Department and Community Development have conducted their respective investigations, and their reports are included in the agenda packet. And there are representatives from Community Development and the Police Department here to answer any questions you may have. Representatives from the business have also been invited to attend the hearing today.
Council, do you have any questions on this application? Oh, Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. There was a note on this one regarding a case that was currently under review, and I was just wondering if it had any relation to or impact on the license request.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ryan Turley. I'm a lieutenant with the police department. Could you please repeat your question, ma'am?
Yes, thank you. For the, in the report from the police department on this case, there was a note regarding a case that was currently under review for one of the applicants, and I just wondered if it was related to or had any impact on the license request, or if it was just a separate matter altogether.
It's a separate matter altogether, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have no public comment,
No, Mayor.
so I'm going to close the public hearing. And council, I am looking for a motion to forward with a recommendation for approval or forward with a recommendation of denial.
Mayor, I move that we forward this application to the state with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, moving down to the next item, I'm going to open the public hearing and have the staff presentation.
Georgiana Stasky, Deputy City Clerk. We have before you today a liquor license application for a new application of a Series 12 license for Proper Meats and Provisions located at 110 East Historic Route 66. The agent on the application is Kelsey Justin Drayton, with owners Kelsey Justin Drayton and Jamie Michelle Drayton handling the day-to-day operations. The Police Department and Community Development have conducted their respective investigations. Their reports are included in the agenda packet, and there are representatives from Community Development and the Police Department here to answer any questions you may have, and representatives from the business have also been invited to attend the hearing today.
Council, any questions? No public comment?
No, Mayor.
I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'm looking for a motion.
I move that we forward the application to the state with a recommendation for approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, congratulations to both applicants. Next up, item number 8, consent agenda. All matters under the consent agenda are considered by the City Council to be routine unless a member of the City Council expresses a desire at the meeting to remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion. The consent agenda will be enacted by one motion approving the recommendations listed on the agenda. Unless otherwise indicated, expenditures approved by council are budgeted items. So we have items A through D. Through D. Would any council member like to pull any item? All right, then I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as posted for items A through D.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right, that's your first second, isn't it? All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, moving down to our regular agenda. First up, 9A, consideration and adoption of resolution number 2025-01. And I see staff coming down.
All right, good evening, or still, good afternoon. I am Lauren Clementino. I am the Senior Planner in Comprehensive Planning and also the city's Heritage Preservation Officer, which is the role I'm here in today. And I'll let Sarah introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Sarah Dector. I'm the Comprehensive and Neighborhood Planning Manager. I was the acting Heritage Preservation Officer from June to December when Lauren happily came over from Economic Vitality to fill this position. So I welcome her today at her first council presentation in this role. And I'm also co-presenting with her so that we can answer questions since we had some handoffs during the process here for doing something we haven't done in 30 years. So we are going to go over the process and what the decision is for today and give you some background on it.
So because this is a unique case to present to you today, we're gonna, as Sarah said, start with some background information. So a little bit about the Heritage Preservation Program, which, as you'll see, comes into play for why we're here today. So the goal of the city's Heritage Preservation Program is to implement the public policy side of preservation of the historic built environment in Flagstaff, and this work includes things like design review, historic property inventories, both of which we'll talk a little bit about later, impact analysis, landmark and historic district formation, and ongoing maintenance. And then we also work with the Heritage Preservation Commission, which we recommended this to you for approval. And the commission advises City Council on all matters relating to historic properties, funding of cultural resources, and review development projects in accordance with our code and cultural resource provisions. So that's a little bit of the background of who we are and why we're here. And then specifically, we're here to talk about listing this property, which includes 4 addresses, 101 and 103 North LaRue, as well as 8 and 12 West Aspen. So here is a current Google Street View of the property, kind of from the corner shot here. And then this is specifically moving over to 103, so you can, which is a little farther up LaRue, see the whole thing. And then it's important to kind of understand some of the context for this case and why we're here. Although many of us would have assumed that this building is already in the Railroad Edition Historic District. It is not. It is in the overlay for the downtown area. So you can see the purple here is the overlay, which includes the building, and I'll kind of scroll over it, but this is the building we're talking about right here, but it is not actually in the Railroad Edition Historic District, which is the background of why we're here today. And that is largely to do, we think, within the time in the 80s when these properties were inventoried and the Railroad Addition District was formed, a lot of inappropriate additions and alterations had been made to the building. And so at that time, it wasn't eligible as a contributor to the district. And then, as we'll discuss, since that time, though, the current property owner has been working to reverse some of those inappropriate alterations and restore the historic integrity of the building. And so this ongoing rehabilitation work, which started in 2017, is why we're here today. So the background is the back end of this property is in the 100-year floodplain. And so, as I mentioned, 2017 moving forward, the property owner started extensive repairs, which restored some of the historic integrity of the building. And I'll go through some other slides later with photos that'll, kind of document the work and that's happened over time. But so from 2017 to 2020, the work fell under a stormwater permit exemption for buildings eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And in 2017, the Historic Preservation Officer at the time deemed that this building was eligible for listing, and that was enough to have the exemption. And more specifically, the exemption is to do with investment in the property. If without the exemption for a property in the 100-year floodplain, there was a capital limit on how much you could invest in the property. You couldn't invest more than 50% of the value of the property. And so this allowed them to move forward with the work. However, in late 2020, the rule for exempting the property changed, and it went from being eligible for listing to being you had to be listed to be exempt from that rule. And a recent state audit of stormwater permits found that the city of Flagstaff had approved improvements in 2021 after the rule change. And we didn't realize it at the time that had happened, and then this was caught in the audit. And so we are here today to correct that for the audit, and listing on the Flagstaff Register of Historic Places would address the audit issue and bring the permits into compliance. We have a 90-day window to do this. And so part of why we're talking about the Flagstaff Register of Historic Places as opposed to the state or national register is because their timelines, we couldn't accomplish it in 90 days. It's a much, much longer process, and although we do think that in the future this building could be individually listed and or could be added as a contributor to the Railroad Addition Historic District, it's just not something that we could accomplish in the time frame that we have. And now I'm going to pass it over to Sarah, who really dug into Title I of the code to establish how we were going to do this.
Thank you, Lauren. As you can see, Lauren's getting up to speed very quickly on a lot of this work. So this process, it was established by the city in 1983 and was used extensively in the 80s and 90s to basically create the districts we know now of Southside and Railroad Addition and the Townsite Historic Districts and the North End Historic District. However, over time, all the things we had on the register were eventually promoted to the state and national register of historic places. And so this process of actually listing things on our local register didn't have a lot of use until FEMA changed these stormwater regulations and said, now if you want to provide this exemption, you're going to have to list it at least on your local register. So this process has been dormant, but in our code for about 30 years. It's been in the code for about 40 years. And so we had not been using this and had to resolve this audit issue. And we may need this process in the future to be able to offer this exemption to other properties that have not yet gone through the process of being sent to the keeper of the National Register as a nomination to basically meet this updated federal requirement. So this is in Chapter 1, not Chapter 10, like the rest of the historic preservation work, so we wanted to go over it a little bit. First of all, anything that is listed on the National and State Register is automatically on our register. So there are about 100 and something buildings in the city that are on our register, but we haven't kept a list because we just go to the national list and find it there. But now we have a reason, excuse me, to come back and look at this again. So eligibility for the register on our local level is basically the same as the national register. But it also and it has a very minimal nomination process. We had no form when this issue came forward on how to collect this information and take it over the counter. So we basically went to the national form and we took out some information that we thought couldn't be pulled together very quickly for a local property, and we basically scaled down the national form. We think that's a good way to approach this because then if someone wants to take a local form and beef it up to send to the state sites committee, they'll have a good basis for doing that. But it's still, the form provided meets all these needs. And then key to our process locally is that you must have property owner written permission, which we do in this case, to put it on our local register. The national register is a little different, and it's important to recognize that being on the register is just an honor roll. It is just an acknowledgement of the historic significance and integrity of your building. It doesn't add any regulations. In fact, it's kind of a backwards thought that this building became eligible again because of the overlay and our implementation of the downtown overlay. That overlay still exists. So something can be in an overlay and on the register, or it can be in one or the other. And the only way it adds regulation is if you're in an overlay. So this register locally could be used to provide this additional opportunity for buildings that are maybe getting improved in a way that makes them more and more eligible for the National Register, but they probably have to be listed on the local register first. When we requested the property owner wanted to put it, if they would want to put it on the register to resolve the audit issue, they had 60 days to respond. They, of course, responded right away. They also have the ability to withdraw the nomination in the future if they would like. But since we're tying this to stormwater permitting, there would be other consequences for that. We are not providing this as a district at this time. We're not proposing to add it to Railroad Edition because we didn't want to have two boundaries for the same district. We figured we would list it individually, and it has enough significance that we believe that would be appropriate in this case. And then if the state and national level believes it's also eligible, they could add it to the national district, and we could redraw that boundary through a separate process that goes through the Secretary of State's office and related offices. One of the interesting parts of this code is that the Historic Preservation Commission is supposed to have a standing subcommittee, but since we haven't used this process in 30 years, they did not have a standing subcommittee, so they quickly formed a 3-person subcommittee that is now a standing subcommittee that we can reappoint every year to address applications like this. And then that subcommittee met, reviewed the nomination, sent it back to the commission in December, and December they reviewed it and recommended it to council. The other steps to this process are that it says planning and development section, but I think the city clerk is going to help us get this resolution you're working on today recorded with the county with this property. And then, as it says the Development Review Board would be involved, but we do no longer have a Development Review Board. So some of this language is obsolete, but we followed all the administrative procedures required in the best way that we can with the systems we still have in place. And with that, I'll give it back to Lauren to talk a little bit more about the significance and integrity of this building.
Thank you, Sarah. And I would just add, now that you've seen all the things about the Flagstaff Register, and Sarah also mentioned the differences between that and the overlay, and that the overlay is not sufficient to meet that listing requirement. So one more difference there with, and that is something you may have already in your time on council seen an overlay or a landmark overlay come before you to review, and that is why we aren't using that process and instead using this process for the first time in 30 years. So jumping over to why the building is significant and some of the fun features of it. So this, you received in the packet the full nomination form, and this is just a quick summary of some of the great things about the building to point out. It was constructed in 1924, and the historic period of significance is 1924 to 1963. There are 4 criteria for listing on the National Register and the state and our local register. And this is being nominated under Criterion A, which is historical events, as well as Criterion C, which is significant design or construction. And historically, this was the pay and take it market and also the original J.C. Penney's, which operated in downtown for a few decades. And it is one of only 2 downtown buildings in the Spanish colonial architectural style. And the Kinlani apartments are one and perhaps the oldest apartments in downtown Flagstaff, and definitely one of the oldest continually occupied apartments in downtown Flagstaff. So very neat feature. And so this is a 1948 Sanborn Fire Insurance Company map, and the blue block in the lower corner here is the building that we're talking about. And this is a 1929 advertisement from our local paper for the opening of the Kinlani Apartments, which claims to be the first large modern apartment building. And you can kind of see, it's hard to tell with the crease of the paper, but you can see a rendering of it in the middle here, along with a lot of the local companies who participated in furnishing the building and their advertisements. And so this is a late 20s photo taken from the southeast. So you can see, so this is what it looked like originally, and then it's a good benchmark for how we changed over time and then have gotten closer again to this original facade. And this is 1934 photo, and so taken standing outside the Orpheum looking at the other end of the building. And a 1939 view from the same location. And 1941, so the top and the bottom ones here are of this property. And 1964, luckily, all of the powwow parade photos did a great job of recording this building for us through time. And so now this is the 60s, taken from the northeast, so different view. Looking down, you can see the Weatherford in the background. And you can see already some major changes to the facade. And another from the same time period, closer to the front of J.C. Penney. And these are from 1973. And it's got a Maloney's is coming soon down on the bottom. So you can see, when it was being remodeled for that to go in. And these photos are from 2017, so they're right before all of the rehabilitation work that the property owner has been doing in the last few years. So you can see where it was before we get back to where it is today. So you can see a lot of the things that were removed and needed to be put back. And so this is the before image. And so to summarize, the Heritage Preservation Commission, so they, per all of the code requirements that Sarah outlined, they created the subcommittee to review the application and nomination as required per code at the HPC meeting on November 20th of last year, and then the subcommittee met on December 2nd and approved it and referred it back to the Maine Heritage Preservation Commission, who approved it and recommended it to you at the December 18th meeting to approve the listing. And that is the end of our presentations. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have a question from Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to first just note one of the comments in the advertisement in the Coconino Sun that you shared. In our packet, it was split across 2 pages, so it took a little bit of effort to pull the quote together. But I thought it was really cool and worth noting regarding the Kinlani Apartments. The proprietor, Mrs. Hall, stated that I hope in the future to add other units to this building and thus still further help solve Flagstaff's housing problem. Now, there's a couple reasons that that's noteworthy. Of course, I think you know what the first one is from the laughter is the fact that, you know, even in 1926, Flagstaff had a housing problem. But I think what's even more noteworthy with this is that goal and those efforts at that time and the continued efforts from both Mr. And I always think I'm saying his last name wrong, but Leviton, is that correct? And the Leviton Investment Properties, both to maintain these historic properties and provide adaptive reused homes in the work that organization does, as well as maintaining affordability in the homes offered. So I think it's a really telling moment in Flagstaff history that that was the intention of those apartments, and it's work that is continued by the current owners even today. That said, and this is not any sort of objection to this listing or anything like that, I'm just trying to better understand what the implications are of this listing. I did note in the comments in the staff summary that the addition of at least one of these properties contributes to the maintaining of historic housing. And I'm just wanting to hear anything more about what the benefits of these additions to the Flagstaff Historic Register are.
Sure, you're thinking, well, first, just another comment. Some of the research pointed that the part of the impetus for creating additional apartments downtown was to attract and house teachers and professors at the university. So really, so just interesting note to point out there. But in terms of the benefits for the property and the property owner, is that what you're asking for listing? Yeah, so it's mostly honorary at the local level. If the property owner was to choose to pursue listing at the national level, national listing does come with some tax incentives, and there can be, and with that, then also eligibility for other types of grants and some assistance that way. So there definitely can be financial incentives that just, if property owners in general want to pursue that, just a little bit a longer road to go to do that. But, and as mentioned, yeah, there aren't really any restrictions that this places on anyone. But it would, if they chose to, as Sarah said, take the research that's already been done, they could translate that into a National Register nomination, and or we could use it looking at expanding the Railroad Addition District to include it to provide additional benefits.
Thank you very much.
Vice Mayor Sweet.
Thank you. I don't really have any questions, but I have a couple of comments. So I walk by this building, and I have been pretty much every day since 1993, and I've watched the progress, and I think that the property owner has done a great job of restoring it, and Thank you for the photos. I love learning about the history of the buildings downtown, and I did not know a lot about this one, so I appreciate that. And I am definitely supportive of this listing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia.
And my question kind of dovetails with Councilmember House's, in that I was curious, in your experience, does adding historical protections add property value typically, or is there any variance in value when protections are placed from your experience?
No, I think generally not. There is, it kind of depends on the use of the property. The value, of course, as I mentioned, that you can have other financial resources available to you and in the tax incentives and things, but in terms of whether or not your property value goes up or down, generally no. However, there are other, especially for buildings like this that have a commercial use, there is a pretty well documented incentive that businesses in historic districts and utilizing historic buildings and places with high tourism like Flagstaff, that generally is an attractor. So that can be a commercial benefit there.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to mention that I am a big advocate for historical preservation. As I've said in the past, learning from our past is important. And some of those pictures that we were seeing from the mid-'70s and things, the only thing that we were learning there was about, maybe not tacky architecture, but didn't say as much as what the building is becoming as we look at it in its original form so far into the future. Thank you very much for bringing this to us.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, I am looking for a motion.
Mayor, I would like to move that we read resolution number 2024-53 by title only.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. City Clerk?
If I could make one note, that resolution is actually 2025-01, so there may have just been a typo on the agenda.
Would you like me to restate it?
If you could, please. My apologies.
Okay, I move that we read resolution number 2025-01 by title only.
And can we get
I'll
Sorry,
second.
a second.
any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, City Clerk.
A resolution of the Flagstaff City Council listing 101 North LaRue Street, 103 North LaRue Street, and 8 West Aspen Avenue and 12 West Aspen Avenue on the Flagstaff Register of Historic Places.
Thank you. Councilmember House, did you want to make a motion?
I would, thank you, Mayor. I'll move to adopt resolution number 2025-01.
And I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you so much. All right, moving down to discussion items. Item number 10A is a discussion on 2025 state and federal legislative priorities.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Sarah Langley, Public Affairs Director. So this afternoon, we're going to discuss your 2025 legislative priorities. I'm joined tonight by Bob Holmes, who you can see on the screen. He is our federal lobbyist and based in Washington, D.C. And we're also joined by Brian Murray, who's also on the meeting. He is our state lobbyist and is based in Phoenix. So our discussion this afternoon will begin with just a quick overview of what the Intergovernmental Affairs Program looks like and what you can expect to happen over the coming months. Then we'll jump into the federal and state legislative priorities and get your input and feedback on those documents. After that, in 2 weeks, we'll be back in front of you to formally approve those documents with all of your feedback and input. So a note about the operations of our program. The Intergovernmental Affairs Program is really centered around the priorities that you will create here tonight. These priorities signal to staff and to Bob and Brian, our lobbyists, what the key issues are for council and where we should be focusing our time and energy. It's important to note, of course, that we can't focus on everything, so these priorities should be succinct, easy to communicate, and also easy to understand. We also wanted to note that it's helpful when the priorities are strategic and ideally focused on things that are unique to Flagstaff, because really Flagstaff City Council and our staff are the only ones who are going to be advocating for Flagstaff issues. So those are important to focus on. So that's a quick overview of our program. I will now turn it over to Bob to give us kind of a look at what we can expect in the coming year in Washington. Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here. I just want to give you a quick overview. Obviously, we had the election in November where we had a split Congress before, where we had a Democratic Senate, Republican House, and a Democratic president. We will now have 3 levers of power controlled by Republicans. They'll control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, of course, come January 20th, when the new president will be inaugurated. What does this mean in terms of earmarks and community funding projects or congressionally directed spending as we know it? Likely not much will change. But what will change is an interesting budget procedure that they call budget reconciliation, which can only be done when they have 3 levers, the 3 levers of power, the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And it will be a kitchen sink of items, including probably border and immigration, probably some renewing of the Trump tax cuts that expired after 10 years and will be expiring at the end of this year, and various and other sundry items such as energy and some other key Republican priorities. That is the mechanism that they can use to get around the filibuster. So that will be the only mechanism that they can use. And so with this one opportunity, they will try to jam as much as they can through. Having said that, the Senate majority for Republicans is 53 to 47, so it's pretty close, and you'd only have to have 3 Republicans. Well, actually, you probably need 4 Republicans because the vice president would break any ties. But in the House, it's even closer. Right now, there's a 1-seat Republican majority. That will increase to 3 seats likely in April when they have 2 special elections to fill House Republican seats currently. So it'll be a really difficult and laborious process, but we will keep our eyes focused on the prize and the things that we're working on. I would be remiss, it's not public until tomorrow, but I want to announce to you all tonight, and most of you probably know that once again, we received a RAISE grant for $19 million that will be again announced tomorrow for Butler Avenue and 4th Street multimodal improvements. So another great work by the whole entire team, including Metro Plan. So that's kind of a quick overview about what's going to happen. Congress is going to be a very aggressive schedule. The Senate is in session for the next 10 consecutive weeks. And in my 25 years of doing this, that's absolutely unprecedented. The House has a pretty aggressive schedule as well, but they are planning to take off one week every month for district work period. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Sarah, and we can discuss some of our legislative priorities and why we placed them in that order. Thanks for allowing me to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. So now we'll go ahead and jump into the draft priorities, which you can see here on the screen and are included in your agenda packet. So this document is basically last year's priorities, but updated and revised based on things that have happened over the past year, accomplishments that have been made, and the like. So we start with our transportation and infrastructure section. This is where the majority of our priorities lie and have done so in previous years as well. Delivering the Rio de Flag is, of course, a top priority for our community, and thus it remains at the top of the list this year. This year, we also added a priority on the Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act and the Red Gap Ranch Regional Pipeline Project. This was actually added to the list yesterday, so you may not have seen it yet, but we did want to add it to the priorities list for your consideration because there have been some significant developments in this area, and we expect it to be a topic of interest throughout the year. As Bob just mentioned, we're still engaged in securing those high dollar grants, $19 million for the RAISE grant. It's just one example of the large grants that Bob and SBK and our engineering team have secured. So that's going to remain a high priority for us this year, is advocating for and supporting our grant applications. Apart from transportation-related funding, we also have a focus on water and stormwater infrastructure, and then also securing discretionary funding for the snow equipment removal building, which is out at the airport. So that's still on our list as well. Moving into the environment section, we have some new priorities this year based on guidance from Nicole Antonopoulos, our sustainability director. So we're now focused on topics of energy independence and job and workforce training in the fields of renewable energy. And then, of course, we continue to cover forest health and the need to support policies that allow for prescribed burns. The last section we have is our community infrastructure section. For the affordable housing priority this year, we spoke with Sarah Dar, our housing director, to update our language, make sure it's current, focusing on programs like CDBG in Section 8. And then, if you'll recall from last year, we added a fire and flood insurance priority. We're recommending that that remain on the list this year. As you may know, Neil Chapman was a member of an important federal commission on this topic, so we'd like to support the recommendations of that commission. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you for the council's feedback on federal priorities.
Great. Thank you so much. Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Bob. So definitely strongly support all of the legislative agenda items, and especially the community infrastructure. I did have a couple of questions about the insurance advocacy work. So I know we've had questions both from the community and on the dais about the affordability of flood insurance and some of the challenges to access limitations of the National Flood Insurance Program. And I'm wondering if that item would cover or enable us to address some of those questions.
Yeah, I think it might, but I think it would make sense also to add a specific clause related to flood insurance affordability, especially as it impacts such a large portion of our community.
And then I know also after fire risk in the past couple of years, there was also a significant reduction in insurance companies that were willing to provide or maintain home and renters insurance policies in Flagstaff. So just wanting to make sure that our efforts to ensure affordability and accessible fire insurance coverage also includes efforts to ensure reasonable assessments and combat insurance companies refusing coverage. I know that was a major issue with a lot of people seeing their coverage just canceled because of perceived fire risk and sometimes the mandatory assessments resulting in a cancellation, even though the property might not have actually been in a fire risk area. So just trying to see what we can do to at least make our legislators aware of that as an issue and try and add additional protections there.
Thank you, Council Member. Yeah, I think, excuse me, that's something that we're seeing play out quite heavily at the state level right now. And I know Paul and Neil and our wildland fire team are working frequently on that issue. It is a complicated issue because, of course, we can't force insurance companies to offer policies. So we need to kind of strike that balance between reducing wildfire risk, but also affordability for homeowners insurance. So yeah, that's definitely something that Bob is aware of, and also Brian. I would feel confident saying that our state legislators are aware of this issue now as well. And so kind of the wheels are starting to turn there.
Thank you.
Councilmember House, and Sarah, if I could jump in quickly, and I really appreciate that question, Councilmember. One of the things we're really trying to do on the federal level, and Neil Chapman can talk to this as well, since he sat on the wildfire commission that really tried to address this, is we're trying to change the hazardous incident period, because some of these fire and floods, they happen over a period of time, and sometimes, for Flagstaff, it's the full monsoon season, and the harmful incident period is a very short time frame. We've been working really closely. We worked with Senator Sinema last year, and she was very aware of this, and we'll continue to work with our two senators and our new senator, Senator Gallego, especially. But also that one of the Republican members is from Oklahoma on the Homeland Security Committee. His name is James Langford. He's been very engaged on this issue. And we are working closely with he and his staff about this harmful incident period, and trying to play that, because with this FEMA kind of, for lack of a better term, it's kind of not, it's not fair that they have this period that works for flooding in the east, but it doesn't really work for flooding in the west. So we're trying to change that and adjust that around. But we continue to work on it, and it is an important issue for the residents too. So we'll keep on that.
Thank you, Bob.
Vice Mayor Sweet, and then Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you. I just had a couple of comments. I think these priorities are in line with what we've talked about for council, and I want to thank you for recognizing multimodal transportation and the value of prioritizing walking, biking, and transit. And I'm glad to see that the snow removal equipment building is in here. That's been in the queue for a while, and I just would like to see that project done. Thank you.
Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure where this question belongs with Bob, Brian, or even Stacy BK, but given going to the snow equipment removal building, I know that as most federal grants, it's required to have matching grant or some type of infusion. And given that our state budget, they wiped out the aviation fund and moved it over to the general fund. Whoever wants to speak on this, Bob or whoever, how do we strategize on moving forward with not having the access to, and Brian's got his hand up too, having the state aviation fund available to us?
Thank you. Bob, you want to jump in?
Well, I think Brian had his hand up,
Brian,
so why
go
don't we
ahead.
defer to Brian as the airport expert?
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for the question, Councilmember Matthews. This is Brian Gall, Flagstaff Airport Director. So the state, as you mentioned, we are going to see some comments in the state legislative priorities to discuss the State Aviation Fund, which is managed by the Arizona Department of Transportation and provides grant funding and matching grants for airport for projects like the snow removal equipment building. This past fiscal year, they did sweep a fair amount of funding out of that state aviation fund to, I believe, the tune of around $10 or $15 million. But that was not the entire state aviation fund. So it did leave ADOT with less money to allocate towards airport projects, but not no money. And so they've indicated to us that their main priority is matching those federal grants. So at this time, the indications we've received from them is that they will be prioritizing making sure those matching funds are available. It's more the specific state-funded grants that we're going to see a reduction of due to that fund sweep at the state level.
Thank you, Brian.
Council, additional questions or comments? Or Bob, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Brian had it right.
All right. So moving on to state.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brian Murray to, again, provide us an overview of what we can expect in Phoenix this year.
Thank you, Sarah. Mayor and council members, It was an interesting election, to say the least. We went from razor-thin majorities for Republicans in both bodies to essentially bulletproof numbers. So in the Senate, we are now at an 18 to 12 Republican majority, and in the House, a 33 to 27 Republican majority. Obviously, Governor Hobbs remains, but the agenda really will be driven by Republican leadership. I think the interesting thing is how the House plays out. You've got Speaker Montenegro. There's a three-way race, and I think there's really three caucuses within the Republican caucus, and so there will be a certain amount of infighting. So I think we're anticipating a long session, like we've seen the last 2 years. And it's also because of how the state budget outlook is. So while JLBC is reporting a $600 million surplus, most of that is one-time funding. It might get as high as $700 million by the time the governor releases her executive budget. But what that means is they have to figure out how to pay for a whole bunch of shortfalls, including Department of Corrections is under a court order to come up with about $320 million. Education is underfunded. The state's own assessment of access now has it close to $1.5 billion underfunded, and they have really no ongoing revenue metrics to be able to use. The only thing that's out there is Prop 123, and so we're hopeful that the legislature refers Prop 123 by the first week of February. If they do not, they will have to account for the loss of revenue in the budget for next fiscal year. And that's a problem because most of the state agencies have come back and asked for supplemental funding in the current fiscal year. So there's not, even though it seems like a very rosy projection on numbers, it simply isn't. It's one-time money that they're likely to use to fill big holes that came about because of these other ongoing issues that the state faces. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't see any questions. Oh, Councilmember Garcia.
Yeah, I had a question here about local control. It said to preserve and recover some of our shared state funding. Can you elaborate on the recover part of that?
Brian, I just put up our legislative priorities. If the council likes, I could run through these quickly, or we can answer council member's question first. Okay, so no worries. All right. So here are the draft state 2025 legislative priorities. And to touch on those guiding principles, we have preserve local control and state shared revenues. These are guiding principles for us every year. As most sessions, we see a lot of bills that try and erode those, take away local control, or just kind of erode our allocation of state shared revenues. And I'm sure Brian or Rick Tatter could touch more on that if necessary. Within our, go ahead, Brian.
I'm sorry, Sarah. I just think in the last budget cycle where the state was $1 billion in the hole, they were looking for fund sweeps everywhere they could. And so that's part of the issue that we face. But the only funds that were swept were primarily one time. The only ongoing funds that were swept came from the universities, and they made a huge cut against all three universities, but that was the only ongoing fund cut from the legislature.
Thank you.
So within the transportation and infrastructure section, we are focused on, again, clean transportation infrastructure and multimodal transportation, including focusing on existing funding that's available for electric vehicle infrastructure. Brian has advised us to advocate that that be spent immediately to avoid it being clawed back by a federal administration incoming. Brian is also assisting us in several asks for state allocations this year related to fire training facilities and stormwater infrastructure, although we do have an uphill battle, as Brian noted, due to the budget situation. We added a new priority this year related to the concern that Councilmember Matthews brought up about the State Aviation Fund. So the priority is to protect the fund from being used from non-aviation expenditures and really keeping those funds for airport operations and maintenance and grants. Moving to our community infrastructure section, we have affordable housing is of course going to be a hot topic this year again at the state. We're already seeing the same bills come back as we saw last year that are looking to remove local control within municipalities' approval processes. So we're really trying to work with the league and with Brian to find that balance between local control but also the promotion of creating new housing units. And then additionally within housing, we'll be advocating for the renewal of the State Department of Housing and the State Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program. We again have our fire insurance policy here that we touched on earlier. This topic is gaining more traction at the state level, and we are expecting to see some bills this year coming forward on this topic. Our fire department is participating in several stakeholder groups here. And so we're really looking to support the recommendations and findings of those stakeholder groups and make sure that any unintended consequences from legislation are minimized as much as possible. And then lastly, we have our environmental section. We'll again be supporting forest health and forest treatments, lobbying the Arizona Corporation Commission to preserve energy efficiency programs, and then of course maintaining our support for open space, heritage preservation, and dark skies. So Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks again, Sarah, and thank you, Brian. This question might be, I see Sarah Dar is here with us, and it might be for her. In terms of the affordable housing advocacy, I know that often we like to use the phrase here in Flagstaff that we're too big to be small, too small to be big when it comes to funding. And I'm wondering if we have started looking at what sort of things, maybe more specifically, we can start pushing for to support Flagstaff's access to some of the funding or programs through ADOH. Or other state programs to support our unique housing needs.
Mayor, Councilmember House, Sarah Dar, Housing Director. I haven't had that question before. 24 years in. So the magic piece of solving that is population. So we either need to decrease or we need to increase. The funds that are available to us through the Arizona Department of Housing are federal pass-through dollars for programs such as HOME, which is always capitalized, but it doesn't stand for anything, emergency shelter grants, et cetera. So we are eligible to compete for those levels with what's called the balance of state, which is every county outside of Pima and Maricopa, which are the major metropolitan areas. We, of course, qualify as a metropolitan statistical area, but it is our entire county. And so without that change in population piece, which would make us eligible to receive the funding sources I just mentioned directly from the federal government, like we do with CDBG, there isn't a funding source offered by ADO that we are excluded from applying for or utilizing. Where we most often get caught in that tween catch you were mentioning is things like USDA money. We're not quite eligible for USDA money, but we're not big enough to access the other sources of funding like HOME from the federal government. Let me ponder that. I'm not quite sure. There's nothing on the top of my head that says, aha, if only we did this or we advocated to this group, because those determinations are really based on geographic area and population size.
Thank you. Yeah, I know
Mayor?
one of the, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mayor and Council Member. I will say that I think there's a move to double the LIHTC cap from 5 million to 10 million, which should be very helpful. And that's something that we've been working towards. There's also a new working group at the legislature that is considering a legislative proposal that will be an add-on to LIHTC. So LIHTC would go to 10 million and then look at doing a risk pool that is essentially a securitized process to allow private vendors to come in, access a mix of state and private capital to build affordable housing. And so I think we'll see legislation on that front this session as well. And again, that's separate from the LIHTC package.
We've also advocated directly to the state to do away with their one project in the state rule that they've had the last several rounds. A developer can pick one, and quite often more lucrative projects. It's expensive to build up here. We see them choose to build in other areas. We've also made some suggestions for changes to the qualified allocation plan. A new 2-year plan will be released this fall that is asking to give priority points to any community that has lost units to the qualified allocation, not qualified allocation plan, I'm sorry, the qualified contract list process, which we received some enthusiastic head nods for consideration, but we will submit those comments formally when that process opens as well.
Hey, thank you both. I know one of the major things that happened maybe this past year or within some of the couple of past years has been for funding through ADOH in terms of resources to combat homelessness. We have seen ourselves not considered or not getting the same amount of attention despite being the largest provider of homeless services for Northern Arizona. So those are the sorts of things that I'm also thinking about in terms of how we can continue to lobby or at least advocate and push for stronger or better considerations of some of the unique programs and things that we're trying to do here that don't often get the same attention as some of the things maybe in the valley or in larger cities.
Thank you for that clarification. Some of those funding sources were allocated by the state as one-time resources and especially targeted towards solving issues in the Phoenix metropolitan area around the zone. And so that is where you did see some of the funding go. We were successful, I think, in 138, more than that. I don't have the number off the top of my head. So thank you for that clarification. We'll pay more attention to that. When you said that we are eligible for, in my mind, I thought municipality. In your mind, you're thinking community. And so I will broaden my thought process on that. And you're right, there are some things we can do. I was thinking that we as a municipality apply for. That's what my answer was based on. Thank you for that. Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't bring my computer, I forgot it, so I'm having to look up just the terminology. But I'll first address affordable housing. Brian, you said that they're looking to increase LIHTC from 5 to 10 million, but the legislators did not fund this year, so Sarah, what are we, 3 or 4 years out before more funding would come in, even if we stayed at 5 million?
Mayor, Councilmember Matthews, for LIHTC funding?
Yes.
To my knowledge, the state has pre-funded the funding for 2025, but there is additional funding coming on an annual basis via the LIHTC program, which is an IRS program. Were you perhaps thinking of the State Housing Trust Fund?
Maybe. Okay. Yeah,
Where
thank you.
Last 2 sessions ago, there was an allocation of $150 million towards that fund, but due to budget circumstances in the last legislative session, that money amount was reduced to $15 million. Is that ringing? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. That is included in the that's the state ones? We did include it in the, no, it's state. It's included in the recommendations to support legislation and seek funding in support of affordable housing, including renewal of Department of Housing and renewal of state affordable housing tax credit program. In the additional language that goes with this, it also talks about funding the Housing Trust Fund at previous levels as well.
Thank you. Then, Brian, I just wanted to put this out there. My cohorts of 2024, Flynn Brown, our team worked with the League and the City of Tempe on a revised TIF for housing bill that was readily applauded and embraced by almost every city and town in the state, but when it was presented to our Senate president, he won't even discuss it. Do you think there is any opportunity to find a way to get through that?
Mayor and council member, Senator Peterson is very conservative and is against most tax credit packages as a whole. And so I don't see any reason that he would change his position.
Yeah, that's kind of the response I got from him. Then also on the clean transportation, I read a lot about the current, not the current as of the 20th, but the past administration had several $1 billion allocated for installation of EV stations for, I think that falls under clean transportation, but I don't understand why only, less than a dozen or a fraction, let's put it that way, were ever installed. How can we get those funds and implemented? Like, it's taken 4 years and we haven't been able to pull from there. Is there a strategy for that? And I know that's kind of a federal question, but.
Well, the state implemented their state NEVI plan, and the NEVI plan is that charging network. What the state essentially decided to do was to focus on major throughways to address the idea of this, I forget what the exact terminology they use, but it's you're worried about running out of battery supply. And so the state intentionally built a network focused on the 10, the 40, the 17, and those major thoroughways in the 8 only. But my understanding is that the full 87 million has come to the state, and it's just a matter of ADOT spending the money. So the money won't be clawed back by the federal government. They just have to do their full implementation. I think we can request from ADOT exactly what that looks like, but in the original plan that they provided, and it's a detailed 150-page plan on why they made the decisions the way they did, they do show where the charging infrastructure goes. But again, it was mostly focused on those areas where there were not large Tesla facilities or private charging stations, so that people wouldn't worry. Now, there was some money that was reserved for low-income areas where in South Phoenix, for example, there's just no charging stations at all. And so they looked at how do they use those funds in ways to benefit all Arizonans, but the majority of the funds were spent on the major interconnector highways.
Okay, well, that's good to hear that there's not a potential for clawback of those funds, so thank you.
I will request the report and I'll send it to your office, though.
Councilmember Aslan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hi, Brian. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too, Bob, if you're still listening. I hope the Potomac hasn't frozen over. That is a metaphor for hell freezing over, I think. But I really appreciate this document. I'm glad we have a chance to review this every year, and I'm glad we're sort of like adding to it and just making those small tweaks. Thank you, Sarah, for all the hard work you put into this, and Sean as well, and the whole team. I'm proud and relieved to see some priorities from the past are still on here. I thank you very much for including our city's dark sky initiatives and our goals for that. There has been some movement with the Arizona Department of Transportation this year in terms of our conversations with them and helping them understand why we're not just kooky and weird up here wanting dark skies, but it's actually important to our economy and to U.S. national security. I think they're starting to see that, and I hope that will pay dividends. I also appreciate that we still have the Arizona Corporation Commission on here. Thank you so much for making that relationship that this council wants to continue to pump energy into. I think it's an interesting body. I'm not sure there's many people on the Corporation Commission right now that are sympathetic to a lot of things we're trying to achieve up here in Flagstaff. But they have other people on top of them that are sympathetic with us. And Brian would just love to think through that with you, how to best triangulate working with them to get our needs met. I was with you in that meeting we did, I guess it was 2 years ago now, where we went down there and we met with some of one of the corporation commissioners. I thought that was productive. You know, I will say this is kind of nitpicky, and I apologize to Brian and to Heidi. I'm not really trying to start a fight here. The Flagstaff Pulliam Airport line item here feels a little bit specific to me. I mean, obviously we want to protect our funds wherever they're at and make sure that they're being used the way that they're specified and not being swept, for example. And of course I love our airport and I understand the need for full funding for that. I just, anyway, it's not a hill I'm ready to fight on. I do think for a document that's listing our priorities, it feels a little specific, and it feels, you know, a little bit just like a pet project, where most of these other ones are a little bit more broad in terms of their language, but that's fine. I did have one question. I'm wondering if anyone in the room was around 6 years ago when I came on council. One of the legislative priorities was fighting for a dark skies license plate project for the state of Arizona. Brian, I don't know if you remember anything about that. Obviously, you weren't working with the city then, but you've been around, so maybe you're familiar with the license plate project pipeline. If that's something that we could fire back up, I would love to see a dark skies license plate available for commuters in the state of Arizona. Again, I will say in the same breath that that's a little bit specific. So just kind of laying that all out there and being transparent with, you know, my open thoughts on some of these things.
If I could just address
Brian,
the license.
can I interrupt quickly? Sterling, did you want to say something before Brian responds?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Aslan, and Council. The Dark Skies license plate effort was basically met by resistance from ADOT, and this was many, many years ago. I'm sure you could reapproach it, but that was my recollection. I happened to be with the council that time because there was a quorum traveling down to the legislative tour that they were doing. So
you're one of the only faces that was consistent way back when. Oh, there's Dan back there too. Yeah, Brian.
I think the issue on specialty license plates is it does require some private capital or public funds. And so what the essentially agreed to language is now, and there's, I think, 60 different license plates that you can apply for, you have to have an initial funder. So we could pass a legislation that says we will create this special dark sky license plate, and unless you have somebody who can come up with $32,000, it won't become enacted because ADOT says, well, we can't cover the cost of creating it. But the nice thing is, if you do have somebody, or if the city can allocate the funds, then you are the one who actually gets to draw what the license plate looks like, pending the approval of the director of ADOT. And then what you can do on top of that is create a specialty fund. And so the way that it works is you would get, it's an additional $25 to have this special license plate, of which $7 would go to Department of Transportation for implementation of the fund, and then the rest could go to a separate fund that could go to anybody. It could go to a nonprofit. You could put it towards Lowell Observatory. You could do it to a fund that just advocates for whatever. So you can draft the language any which way, and if that's something that council wants to do, I would suggest the bill filing deadline is coming up quickly, so that we would want to find a bill sponsor immediately and get language to legislative council and have the language drafted. But again, even if we got the bill passed, which I think we could, the real question is there private funds available to make that $32,000 payment?
Thank you so much for that explainer. I'm glad to have had that, and I'm glad the rest of council heard it as well. I don't think this rises to the level of a council priority per se for state legislative stuff, but it is something I'm interested in maybe pursuing. I think what I'll do first is get a hold of our Dark Skies Coalition and see if that's something that group can sort of put some elbow grease into. But stay tuned, council. I think it's an interesting idea. Would love to see that come to fruition. I thought of it now because originally there is a history of council putting in their legislative priority list the pursuit of that specialized license plate. But again, just to clarify, I don't think this rises to what we're talking about here today, but stay tuned.
Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to just reiterate, going back to definitions of specific priorities, and maybe just put it more in a general term, but that funding, as you know, Brian, the aviation funding is for the airport as a whole, not just the specific project or two. And it's about the safety of transportation that hundreds of people, if not thousands, use on a monthly basis. And so I do just want to follow up on the back end to say I don't see that the aviation fund as being specific. I think that it should be protected like the HERF funds are protected, because there are many regions in our state that rely on those funds to maintain their airports as a viable means of transportation. So just want to make sure we keep that on there.
Any additional questions? Brian, I'd like to circle back to Councilmember Garcia's initial question about the state shared revenues, and wondering if you can expand upon why we've seen a decline in state shared revenues and what we should be looking for in terms of protecting and recovering them.
So Mayor, I think it really boils down to the legislature got exactly what it wanted. And what it wanted was a flat tax, and it wanted to have an unencumbered ESA program. And so I don't think there's any question that the flat tax did exactly what it was intended to do, which was to drive state revenues down. And so it's just made it difficult to find new sources of revenue because, as you know, it requires a supermajority of the legislature to enact any kind of tax increase. When you look at ESAs, I think the rosiest projection was, it'll only cost $300 million. I think the new estimate is going to cost close to $780 million. And these prices and these costs for that program will continue to rise, while at the same time, revenues are flat while we've been through a tough economy. And so I think it's really more of, if you look at how leadership approaches things right now, it's a start of the government approach to government, right? That is kind of the overall, if you look at how the Republicans have approached things. Now, there are some things that Republican lawmakers who are the most conservative say, we want additional funding for access and some of these critical things that they feel government should provide service for. But I think in reality, the flat tax itself is the number one driver of how our revenues just are going to stay flat, and it's very, very low. And until more jobs and companies come to Arizona, it's just going to be hard to make up some of those revenue numbers.
Thank you. All right. I think we're done here, right?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor and Council, and Bob and Brian. We will be back in 2 weeks for your formal approval. Thank you.
Yes, thank you both. All right, moving down to item number 10C, City of Flagstaff Quiet Zone discussion. That's why you were getting up and you were like, what? 10B, courtesy snow berm relocation and snow hero information and discussion. My apologies, staff.
Good. It's still good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. Amy Hagan, Assistant Parks and Recreation Director. Have a couple coworkers here to present tonight, so I'll just kick it off. This is about our Courtesy Berm Relocation Program, as well as our Snow Hero Program. And in discussions, we have Mr. Gino Leone, who's our Parks Manager, and Mr. Stephen Thompson, our Sustainability Manager. So without much ado, but I think everyone should do a snow dance. I wore a snow ski sweater today, hoping that we get some snow soon in an effort with this conversation. So here we go.
Thank you, Amy, and good evening, Mayor and Council. As Amy said, my name is Gino Leone. I'm the Parks Manager for the city, and thanks for giving us a little bit of time to discuss these two great programs the city has to offer. I want to start with the general overview of the Courtesy Berm Relocation Program. This is a program managed by the Pros Division with the intent of relocating the snow berm created in the right-of-way as a result of a public works snow operation to ensure driveway access for the qualified resident. The berm is relocated using various mechanical means, snow plows and small equipment. It also relies on a high level of communication, beginning with the application process, annual communication with qualified residences for renewals, snow assignment tracking, as well as coordinating with our partners in Public Works for program success. The program is offered to residences within the city limits with a qualifying permanent or temporary medical condition through an online application, as you can see on the screen here, as long as with the web address. It could also be found with a very basic internet search. Flagstaff Courtesy Berm Removal Program will bring you to this landing spot. I will mention there is an annual renewal requirement as well, just to remain eligible on the list. The qualifying conditions are the same as an MVD, a disability placard application, and must be signed and certified by medical professionals. Some of the qualifying conditions would include the inability to walk 200 feet, the inability to walk without the use or with a prosthetic or other assisted device. There could be various longer heart conditions and arthritis, just to name a few. The full list of these eligibility criteria, along with a very helpful FAQ, is located on the city website as well. This process is managed with a high level of communication amongst the pros team. The whole process begins every August, where the pros team communicates with residences that remained on the list at the end of the previous snow season. This is done as part of the renewal process. It both ensures the service is still needed and the resident's still located at that current address. Then we move into October. That's when the team is gearing up for the winter season. At that time, the pros team creates a current list for the master season. This is based off those household communications in August, as well as any new applications that may have come in since then. All this information is compiled into a shared database, as well as inputted into a pros snow assignment tracking application. I will mention the list is fluid and it does change throughout the season. As new applications come in, people do get added to the list. There could be deletions as well, should the service no longer be needed, a resident relocates out of town, or for someone with a temporary designation, should that term expire before the end of that current snow season. This chart we're looking at here, this is a breakdown of all the pros snow assignments. So starting with that big box on the left, that's 311. So every time there is a snow event in Flagstaff, pros manages a total of 311 snow assignments. And they're broken down into priority levels. As you'll see, 170 of those assignments are the highest priority. Some examples of those assignments would be commuter sections of foots trails, safe to school sidewalk routes, safe ingress and egress from city buildings and properties. And then we have 38, which would be considered medium priority. And then what we're talking about today, the courtesy berm relocation, we're currently at 103 participants in that program heading into this season. And this list is current as of this presentation. It's important to note this list in particular just because PROS is unable to deploy resources to this courtesy program until we are substantially complete with our highest priority assignments. At that time, we're able to deploy resources, staff, and equipment to start this program. But with saying that, with 170 high priority locations, it is likely and usual that it is 24 to 48 hours post any snow event until PROS is able to even start this program. This map we're looking at here, this is a screenshot pulled directly out of the PROS snow assignment tracking application. And this is all the information we saw on that previous slide with those 311 assignments. This just shows them in greater detail on a map showing the whole city boundaries. So those 311 assignments, different symbology. There's lines and polygons for trucks and tractors. Squares are shovels, and then you'll see a little better on the next image, but all the triangles are all of those courtesy locations we're talking about. As you can see on this last map, this is just cleaned up just to show those 103 courtesy locations that we've been discussing. And as you can see, they are scattered throughout the city limits, which is the need, which is the other reason we deploy numerous resources to efficiently and effectively manage the operation when we're able to. And that is a general overview of the Courtesy Berm Relocation Program. And with this just being one of the programs the city has to offer, we do realize there's still community needs to be met, which is why I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Stephen Thompson.
Thank you, Gino, and good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members and community members online or in person. My name is Stephen Thompson, and I serve as a manager within the City of Flagstaff Sustainability Division, and I oversee the Snow Hero program. Now, the Snow Hero program had its pilot year last winter, and this program is meant to complement existing initiatives and programs like Gino just mentioned, because there are a lot of needs in the community, and we try and fill in as many gaps as possible. And this program was developed in collaboration with PROS, Public Works, folks in risk management, our legal division, as well as code compliance and assistance from the Commission on Inclusion and Adaptive Living. All helped play a part in designing this program. And tonight, this afternoon, I will share an overview of the program, how the pilot year went, lessons learned, and how we've changed things this year. But essentially, this program is aimed at connecting neighbors and increasing mobility within neighborhoods by helping neighbors who need assistance clear ice and snow from sidewalks. How does the program work? Well, there's two sides to this program. We have residents who are in need of assistance, so they can request assistance from a snow hero. The requirements are similar to what the Courtesy Berm Relocation Program offers. So have to live within City of Flagstaff city limits, be 62 or older, or have a medical condition, temporary or permanent, that prevents you from clearing your own sidewalks. And we'll take that list and cross-reference it with a lot of maps to identify who has a sidewalk. There are many neighborhoods, as I'm sure folks are aware, that do not have sidewalks. So this program would not apply to those folks. And then snow heroes have to be 18 years or older or have approval from a parent or guardian and are asked to provide their own snow removal equipment, whether that's snow shovels or snow blowers. And they are committing to an entire season to assist residents. So we have residents who request service, then we have snow heroes who say, I want to help. Then we pair them together, so that way it's truly neighbors helping neighbors. Unless there's a snow hero that's like, put me anywhere in the community, I can go wherever you need me to go. But there are a lot of folks who are like, I don't have a vehicle to transport my snowblower, so I need to stay within a mile or so I can walk to assist. So just a little recap on the pilot year. So last year, we had over 40 volunteers who were paired with approximately 20 residents, and those residents are represented in almost every single neighborhood throughout Flagstaff. And some lessons learned from the survey: there's a lot of appreciation for this program from not only the Snow Heroes perspective, as you can see some of these quotes saying, knowing that I was helping someone that needed it. I heard that consistently throughout the pilot year, and residents really appreciating the added assistance and help. Some lessons that we learned: we want to increase consistency and communication with Snow Heroes and the residents. So in year 2, which we are now in, we've expanded the eligibility. So during the pilot year, since it was a pilot, we kept it narrow to only the folks who were already on the snow berm relocation program and offered them this service, just so that way we could test the waters and find out what works, what doesn't work. So we expanded the eligibility to everyone who meets those other requirements mentioned earlier. We're increasing more targeted outreach to specific community groups to help in this effort, and we're integrating better with other operations such as the PRO's berm relocation program, and more real time, since they have that amazing application where they're tracking where berms are being relocated and services are been provided. So that way we can better send out Snow Heroes to neighborhoods that have already had their streets plowed, and we know that there's access in those areas. And as I mentioned, we're increasing communication to more targeted audiences to recruit Snow Heroes, and we're increasing the tools and resources available to Snow Heroes in particular, and expanded training and more robust resources. The Snow Hero program does meet a lot of community priorities or works towards them. Same with the Courtesy Berm Relocation Program. What this looks like: increased mobility, increased access in our neighborhoods, and for not only our residents, but service providers, delivering Meals on Wheels and other services such as that. And I really think that these two programs, and the Snow Hero program in particular, really taps into something that makes Flagstaff special. Neighbors are out there helping neighbors every day, and we're tapping into that mentality, that community mentality that we share, and trying to direct that effort to where it's needed the most. Just a quick recap about the two different programs. So the berm relocation program, operated by the PROS team and PROS staff, relocating snow berms at the end of people's driveways. Snow Hero program, focused solely on the sidewalks adjacent to residences. And for the Snow Hero program, it's based on volunteer availability. So there's not a guarantee that if you sign up for this program, you'll be able to receive assistance. But every year, we're gonna grow and hopefully be able to meet more of those needs. And if you wanna know more about either one of these programs or sign up for these different opportunities, here's some contact information about the programs themselves, and we can open up for questions.
We have lots. Councilmember House.
Thank you. So I think you may have actually already answered one of my questions on the Snow Hero program. It sounds like you do make efforts to pair the Snow Hero within their neighborhood unless they are willing to go further out. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then just in terms of the focus on, within the Snow Hero program on sidewalk clearance, I know one of the things that we've heard frequently is, particularly within the historic neighborhoods like South Side, Sunnyside, and La Plaza, there are areas that don't have sidewalks, but also have major snow challenges in being able to get out of homes and things like that. That is further hindered actually by those lacks of infrastructure. So I'm wondering if there are any considerations on how a service like this or a program like this could be optioned by folks in those neighborhoods, particularly with the focus on inclusivity and increasing access throughout the community. Those are neighborhoods that I know in particular have felt unseen or underrepresented in programs like this, and just wondering what we can do to further them. I know it's volunteer-based, so obviously that has to be a consideration as well, but just throwing that out there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that comment. I did make a note, and I will explore as many different opportunities as we can to see what we can make happen.
Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Steve and Gino. This question is for Gino to start off with, and that was, I wanted you to kind of go back to that 24-hour holding pattern before you guys could start, just to kind of put a finer point on that for those that might be listening at home, to better understand why that berm might still be there. And what are the longer-term berms going to take? You know, are you going to see those out to up to a week, or let's just be honest here?
Sure, yeah. So what I was referring to with that, and it was 24 to 48 hours, and that's just letting people know that this is a courtesy service, and if you remember that slide, we have to complete those 170 that are considered highest priority before we could pull any resources off those. And it could be, it's usually 24 to 48 hours, because we also have that sidewalk ordinance we have to meet for the city as well. And as soon as we are complete, as soon as we have, you know, we'll be running 10 trucks and 6 tractors, say in a storm. As soon as one of those plow trucks is done with their high priority, they can be reallocated to the courtesy program. But in order for us to complete our high priority assignments, there typically is a lag of at least 24 hours until we're able to get resources out there.
Excellent, thank you. That answers my question, and I just wanted to make sure that, you know, before the snow starts, and before you start getting those phone calls,
Sure.
folks in the room can relate that to their neighbors.
Sure, and then as far as like longer term, we were, as soon as we start with, well, depending on how many people are out, we're starting with one address, and we work through the list. So by the time, you know, probably day 2, we probably have 4 staff that are assigned to the program. So we get them all done within, once we start the program, it's probably 24 hours until we're completed with it.
Well, from what I've seen in the past, at least there on Center Street, you guys do a pretty good job of coming around when you need to. So I really do appreciate you taking care of the Sunnyside neighborhood, or at least last year. I made a note of that for sure. And the next question, I guess, is for Steve in a little bit. And that will be, well, it's not really a question. Actually, Councilmember House already covered that for us. It's more of a comment about the Snow Heroes program. And I think that one of my favorite things about this is contextualizing sustainability under things that are outside of the realm of what you would normally think as far as EV vehicles or better insulation for your houses. Having a group of community members in your neighborhood or on your block that are willing to clear your snow out really builds a sense of a connection, so that way when other things come up in the neighborhood, you have friendships. And then you have people that you can rely on and count on, and then that way when you're pulling out of your driveway and turning down the street and you see somebody walking down the street, no longer are you just looking away from them, but you're waving at them and saying hello. And I think it really does help those folks who have limited abilities and you know, might not be able to get out as much, actually want to get out a little bit more. I thought that this was the coolest program when it first came out because, you know, growing up here in Flagstaff, that's just something we did. We didn't charge for it. We just cruised around a pickup truck with some snow shovels and found people who needed help and pitched in, dug people out. And that's what Flagstaff does. And to make a program in the city that reflects just the spirit of Flagstaff is excellent. And I want to thank you very much for that. And I just wanted to know when it was our turn to add some colorful plow phrases to the term, because I think I came up with, just sitting here thinking about it, I came up with snow your roll. And for the hip hop community, Snoop Doggy Dogg. Thank you. Thank you, Madam
Vice Mayor Sweet.
Thank you. Both of those are great, Councilmember. I do love both of these programs. I went out and did some berm help a couple of seasons ago, and it's hard work. So I think this is important, and I appreciate the time and effort that you've created this. I just had a question for the Snow Hero program. You had talked that you're increasing communication and the tools for the Snow Heroes. Can you give me a couple of examples of each?
So traditionally, we rely heavily on social media, press releases. Last year, we did a lot of bus advertising and flyering around town. The direct communication with specific groups, whether it's clubs and organizations out of NAU or high schools. I have a list back at the office after talking with folks at Mountain Line and other multimodal transportation groups to say these folks may be interested in joining the program. So working more through those channels and relying on existing networks besides me trying to capture it all in one place, trying to spread it out a little bit more. So specifically there. And then as far as the tools and resources, solidifying a more robust training for snow heroes to make a stronger connection between snow heroes themselves. Last year, it was very much, I signed up, I'm paired with this resident. This year, we're trying to build more of that community between snow heroes themselves. So then, hey, I can't cover my assignment because I'm gonna be out of town or something like that. They already have someone that they can reach out to.
Thank you, and thank you again for all of your work with us.
Thank you.
Councilmember Aslan.
Hi, Gino. Hi, Steve. Thanks, guys. A couple questions for you. Oh, first, I just want to heap on the praise here a little bit. These programs have obviously been so necessary for a long time. Your team has really stepped forward and brought a very needed, necessary service to the community. I'm so glad that the pilot project has been working. Can't wait to see this brought up to scale. And it's nice to see, government providing more of an esoteric service just by connecting neighbors and getting volunteers engaged who want to be out there, connecting them with people who have clearly needed help and will continue to need help. My questions are all about semantics. And I think this is more than trivial, so bear with me. And Amy, I see you. Amy's bouncing around behind you. She's eager and willing to speak on these topics too. Go ahead and throw in if you want to. The first one is a berm relocation. There's something super amusing to me about that phrase. It's like, we're keeping the berm. We're just gonna move it a little bit. Why are we calling it berm relocation? Was there a conversation about that? Just right off the bat, berm busters comes to mind as something you could use to sort of get in the heads of people a little bit better. And then with Snow Hero, I'm very curious, back when this project was first being bandied about, it was referred to as the Snow Angel program. And I want to know why that name didn't stick. I want to know why we had to change to Snow Hero. I'm curious if that was an internal conversation and a preemptive, something that you preemptively just decided it was more PC, or because Snow Angel just seems to me like a perfect name for this project. And I don't know why it was changed and what the conversation was that sort of resulted in the final evolution of that.
All right, I'm back. So the reason why the courtesy berm relocation is semantically titled that way, because the berm is physically not becoming removed. I think the operation would probably take weeks if we were physically removing all 103 of them. So we are literally relocating it elsewhere in the right-of-way, or creating even a larger berm on the outside of the driveway approach. I think we could certainly entertain a renaming, especially after our largest media interaction with the community was on the snowplow naming. And I apologize, Councilmember Garcia, we do have a scoop dog. So we have one. We may have a few surprises out there too. But we could certainly entertain that because it feels very technical, right? Very tactical. And since we've are engaging with the community on plow names, I think that we could certainly consider renaming this as long as it still made sense on what the actual action was for the approved applicant so they understand it's not physically being removed. For snow heroes, I'm gonna have to lean on Mr. Stephen Thompson or Jenny Neiman.
Yeah, thank you for the question about the name of the Snow Hero program. When the conversations were first starting, there's a lot of reference to other programs throughout the country that are called Snow Angel. One of the decisions for going towards Snow Hero is to distinguish between our program and other programs that exist. So that way it's easy to find information about our program. Like if you type into a search engine, Snow Hero, our program is one of the first ones that pops up. So easier access there. And during the survey of all the snow heroes and the residents who received service last year, one of the questions was, what would you change, if anything, about the program, in parentheses, including name or other details there? No one mentioned about wanting to change the name, so going to rely on that survey every year to make sure staying in alignment with what the volunteers and the residents would like to see.
Thank you guys so much.
Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, I didn't hear if you mentioned a good resource for the Snow Heroes are young adult groups through the churches. I know at the church I go to, it's a pretty large group, and they're always looking for opportunities to serve the community. So if you haven't, sent out maybe a notification, that might be worthy. And Amy, maybe, this is the dark side of me, but berm relocation, if, maybe you're upset with a neighbor and so you could pay to relocate it over here of mine, it might turn into a enterprise fund. That's all I have. Thank you for all your work. This is really great to have our community come together. I know we get frustrated with the big berms that are created by the snowplows that dump onto our sidewalk, but my husband and I are senior citizens, so maybe we'll sign up for the berm relocation.
I too love both programs, have been on ride-alongs with the relocation the berm relocation, the berm busters, if you will. And am so glad to see the sidewalk, the Snow Heroes, to see it growing. And, we've got this council, we've got an emphasis on multimodal transportation, and this is key to people's mobility in the winter, keeping our sidewalks clean and cleared of snow. And so to please relay to your volunteers that they are doing probably an even bigger service than they recognize that they're doing in the community. It's not just for that neighbor, it's for the entire neighborhood and then the entire community. I know that we had talked about, we had some back and forth about liability issues and driveways. And I think I recall it being left at, it's up to the individual volunteer, or are they instructed not to clear driveways?
Thank you for that question. Snow Heroes are instructed to clear only the public sidewalk.
Thank you. All right, thanks so much.
When the plow comes through your neighborhood, who are you going to call? Berm busters.
The berm busters with special revenue funding.
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity and for the opportunity for us to demonstrate a very operational part of this, and then, so the heavy and then the fluffy snowflakes for this with our Snow Hero program. Thank you. I'm still hoping it snows, clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we're down to item number C, which is the quiet zone discussion.
I don't hear a horn, though. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yeah, you gave me a little sprint there a few minutes ago from my office. I thought I knew the agenda order. Good evening, I'm Jeff Bohman. I'm the traffic engineer for the city. I'm going to get this presentation started. We have 5 people tonight that are going to run through this presentation, all the different pieces. But I'm going to get us started. Here's what we're going to go over. I'm going to talk about what are quiet zones. Quiet zones, we'll talk a little bit of detail, but simply the train horn typically doesn't blow at railroad crossings, at grade crossings with the roadway. Where's the quiet zone? We have a quiet zone across our whole city. So all 5 at-grade crossings are part of the quiet zone in Flagstaff. Quiet zone status, this is kind of the crux of the conversation, and we'll go over that. We are a current quiet zone, but we have some risk, and we're going to talk about what's going on and what we're doing to try to mitigate that. Lieutenant Dar's here from the police department. He's going to talk about our crash history over the last couple of years, actually over 10 years, and some enforcement activities that they do along the railroad tracks and that they may be able to step up. We have a kind of a special guest, Sarah Logan. She's a Federal Railroad Administrator, Federal Railroad Administration Inspector in California. She's joining us from Teams, so she'll jump in when her slide comes up. We're going to talk about the planned capital improvements. We have a number of improvements at our railroad crossings across town that are not fairly long-term, but a couple of years, and big projects, Downtown Mile, Lone Tree Overpass, those types of things. Christine Cameron's going to talk about that. She's also going to talk about some interim improvements that we're trying to implement very quickly to improve safety at our crossings. We're doing some outreach and education pieces. You may have already seen some of those on the radio or social media, and Sarah Langley is going to talk about those. So that's the outline. I'll get started. So what are quiet zones? This stuff is pulled pretty directly from the FRA. So your quiet zone needs to be at least a half-mile long. We easily meet that. We're going from Beaver Street all the way across to the Fanning Drive crossing. So we meet the half-mile distance, and we also have met the FRA's rule for quiet zone establishment at each of those crossings, and I'll go through that briefly at each crossing. It's actually not super complicated at our crossings, but I'll go through those. City of Flagstaff led the quiet zone establishment for our area back in prior to 2010, but it became official in 2010. The FRA's rule for quiet zones was enacted in 2005. I believe we were one of the first, I think we were the first city in Arizona to implement, so that's kind of cool. The implementation process was lengthy, Corporation Commission hearings, Federal Railroad Administration, lots of coordination with BNSF, and then there was improvements that needed to be done in the field as well. Quiet zones, a section of railroad locomotive horns are not routinely sounded when trains approach. You've all heard train horns on occasion, and that happens when there's a bunch of different things that could happen from BNSF rules and FRA rules, but a common thing is a pedestrian is near the crossing and the conductor sees that and blows the horn as typical, even in the quiet zone, and that's completely okay. And the city affirms to the FRA that all of our devices and conditions continue to meet the requirements of the FRA's quiet zone rules. We do that every 2 to 3 years. Actually got notice today that our affirmation is due. So we'll be working on that tomorrow. And it's been 3 years, January of 22 since we did it, so it's definitely due. Again, here's a map of the city. I think this is kind of fun. So the stars are at-grade crossings where the road and the railroad tracks are at the same level. That's what we're mostly concerned about with the quiet zone. We've also highlighted the 3 overpasses, underpasses that we have, and the 4th one on the map also is Lone Tree, which we're very active working on, as you know. So I'll go into a little bit of detail at each crossing, but not too much. So this is the Beaver Street crossing. See if my cursor shows up. It does. So of course, Beaver Street is one-way southbound, and there's active gates and warning devices across both lanes. And that actually allows this quiet zone. So when you're implementing the quiet zone, there's calculations. And so it's called the Quiet Zone Risk Index. And the Quiet Zone Risk Index, so if your crossing does not have a train horn, but with all the physical implements that are in place, the risk index needs to be the same as a crossing with a train horn or better. So at one-way streets, they're very safe in railroad crossings because you have gates across both lanes of traffic. At a two-way street, usually you only have gates on the approaches. So it's not common, but a common crash occurrence is where drivers go around the gates. So one-way streets with two gates are automatically, you don't have to do anything else to get quiet zones typically. So that's how Beaver Street and San Francisco Street meet the qualifications for the quiet zone. So that's Beaver. Here's San Francisco Street, of course, the paired one-ways, and this is northbound, active gates and warning devices across both northbound lanes. So that's how the quiet zone was met for Beaver in San Francisco. Ponderosa Parkway, interestingly, is kind of similar because it has a long median, and it's treated, as I understand what we did in 2008 or so when we started this process, we treated it as two one-way streets because we have full gates across the approach of both one-way streets. So Ponderosa Parkway turns out to be pretty similar to Beaver and San Francisco Street. This is all just background. There's a picture of the crossing. You can see the medians. We have some vertical delineators and some bollards out there as well. Here's where it gets a little bit different. Steves Boulevard, our next crossing as you go to the east. This is of course a two-way street. So we have the traditional gates, and I didn't get a great picture as I'm describing this, but here's the southbound lanes, and there's a gate across southbound. Northbound lanes, there's a gate here, so vehicles could kind of meander, chicane around those gates. So this, and there's no median, this is just a painted median. So we don't have the median, there's median length requirements, and this crossing is really tight between the rail and the nearest, between the rail and the length of the median should be 100 feet. This doesn't meet that requirement. There's an exception in the FRA rules when you have a perpendicular roadway, and that's 60 feet, and we're still super, super close. We've explored this location for some improvements to eliminate the wayside horns, but that's not what we're talking about today. But what this crossing has is wayside horns. I have a picture of that. Wayside horns, there's one mounted in each direction. So the idea is this horn sounds similar to the locomotive horn. It's at a typically lower decibel level. The requirement's 92 decibels at 100 feet, and that's part of our affirmations as we measure that to make sure our horn is sounding 92 decibels at 100 feet on the approach. Also has, they are required to have this indication so the locomotive engineers know that it's operational. If it's not operational, they sound the horns, and that's sometimes why you hear horns on the east side. This equipment sometimes fails or powers out or something happens. So wayside horns are what make the Steves Crossing and the Fanning Crossing quiet zones. So there's still a horn, but it's focused on the approach to the street, not the locomotive going down the tracks for a quarter mile, and tends to be at a lower decibel level. There's no flashbacks by saying decibel level. Fanning Drive is also a two-way street, also has the tight spacing to Route 66, and also has wayside horns. So this is how we developed our quiet zone. This is how we affirm the quiet zone to the FRA periodically as we go out and measure these things, make sure everything's working, check all of our signs and markings, and there's a few other things, but that's the basic requirements of the quiet zone. So that's our quiet zone defined. As I said, kind of the crux of the discussion tonight, our quiet zone status. So this fall, and many of you probably heard about this through different media outlets, we had a number, it was less than 5, but there were several pedestrian train incidents. Some were fatalities, some were not fatalities, but there were several in a row over a couple-month period, and this caught our attention, it caught the attention of the FRA. And so the FRA sent me a couple of letters. What's going on? Have things changed? What should we do? So we talked to them a little bit. We responded, hey, we have a lot of really cool safety projects. We've got the, and Christine's gonna go in a lot of detail on these, but we've got a bunch of safety projects through the Downtown Mile. We have some state grants out at Fanning and Ponderosa Parkway. So a bunch of really good stuff is coming, but it's not coming immediately. It's at least a year away, if not a couple of years away. So pretty quickly, the Corporation Commission sent a letter to us and to the FRA and said, hey, we recommend you suspend the, FRA, we recommend you suspend the quiet zone immediately until all of these projects can be in place. And we know Downtown Mile and things are, and Lone Tree Overpass are quite a ways off, so that was not great. We continued conversations with FRA. They did not suspend our quiet zone immediately. You'd know about it if they did. This has all happened since November. We had a field visit. We had around 20 people, FRA, BNSF, Shelter Services, City PD, City Manager's Office, Public Works, Streets, Engineering, all sorts of people. And we walked all the sites and we kind of brainstormed, hey, what kind of improvements could we do quickly that could help us with these pedestrian train incidents? So we did the field visit. We came up with a list of interim safety improvements, and Christine will go through those in more detail. And the FRA said, hey, that looks pretty good. Get going on it and get it all done by February 28th. We're trying really hard. We're going to get a lot done, I think, by February 28th. But right now, Sarah can go into a little more detail, but they're saying, hey, you really need to get all these things done by February 28th. So we'll talk through what that looks like and what we're doing. Christine will do all that for us. So that's setting you up for the rest of the presentation. Lieutenant Dar is up.
We don't get this pleasure very often.
I was going to say the same thing. A long-time listener, first-time caller. I am Ryan Dar, I'm a lieutenant with the police department in criminal investigations. And the reason I'm here is we have the statistics that I have for you kind of shows we went all the way back to 2010, shows that we do have quite a few incidents every year. Last year was high, but was not our highest. You can see 2020 was our highest there. And I first want to say any one of these is too many. And one of the reasons why I wanted to work on this was to dig down and find out why these things are happening. Not just, are they accidents? Are they on purpose? And the numbers I have for you here, it's hard to tell. I'll tell you right now, my detectives go out on every single one of them. And determining in the middle of the night how something happened is a hard thing. But we have been able to, in the last 2 years, I've dug into those reports, and I can tell you right now, a vast majority of our fatalities and our incidents are from suicide. It is people that are not crossing at the crossings. They are it's not accidental. They're laying down on the tracks. They're standing in the middle of the tracks and waiting for the train. So we can go to the next slide there. I guess I can do that, huh? So here's our location. We have 4 there in the downtown area, and then these are the last 2 years, and then we've had 3 over near Fanning, and then even further on where we've had at the Underpass Country Club. And that's a little bit more detail. Like I told you before, these are not happening at the crossings. 4 of our 14 were at the crossings. I can go into more detail if you'd like, but there was one incident where someone tried to beat the train and they were using a walker, and their walker became lodged, and they were struck, and thank goodness not killed. They were injured. So that's one of those, but the rest of these are, like I just described to you, they're people either laid down on the tracks or walking on the tracks, and they're looking directly at the train, or sometimes they face directly away from the train. But each one of these trains has video, and before my investigator closes that case, they make sure that they've seen the last few seconds. It takes a toll on them, but that's what I require them to do so that we can close this, if there are anything to be gleaned from that. So some of the things that we've done, enforcement activities, we have zero tolerance for anyone trespassing on the tracks. Our officers don't drive by. If they know they see someone walking on the tracks, they stop. All of these collisions, they are all toned out, which means our officers are sent code 3 as soon as either BNSF or a passing motorist calls, however the 911 comes in, because we do have, we have had people who are just glancing hit by the train, and they need immediate medical attention. So we do respond to these code 3. All of our enforcement activity is on the tracks. If you're walking at an area on the train tracks that is not a crossing, you're probably going to get contacted, and we have zero tolerance. So you will get either a citation or possibly arrested if you're walking on these tracks. And that's one of the things that we've done to try to alleviate some of these. The FRA actually had some really good suggestions, and these pictures here are some of them. We are already working with the Flock camera group for our license plate readers across town. We brought that to you earlier this year, and those are working. What we would like to do is we'd like to put some of these cameras on these areas where we've had, and it doesn't have to be at a crossing, where the areas where we've had. That will also mean that we're going to have to monitor that. Right now we have where our officers will get notification of a license plate, like a stolen car comes through town, they start getting real-time notification. That's what we would like, is if they see people in one of these areas where there shouldn't be people, that we get notification of that, and then they can respond to it without having someone have to call 911. We will use those cameras to keep people safer so that we can get there faster and hopefully affect that. That's the last of mine. I do have other statistics for years before. Letting you know the statistics have gone up, but not significantly. We had a few years before this where we're at 5 incidents. And you can see that my numbers were 8 last year, and the highest have been 10. So the quiet zone, it really hasn't had an effect on how many people. And I don't know if it goes away. I don't know if we have an effect on it. Are there any questions?
Councilmember House.
Thank you. I wanted to circle back to the comment that you made about not only the majority of the fatalities being considered suicides, but also just the officers watching those videos and the impact that it has on them. So I know we're going to talk about the mental health efforts that are being made as part of the safety here, but I'm wondering what is done for those officers that are watching those videos? Is there any sort of support that's offered or additional resources that are given to them when they have to experience that, essentially?
We have ongoing wellness, and those are, the people that are watching those are detectives. And there are 14 detectives here in the city of Flagstaff that work with the Flagstaff Police Department. I know every single one of them personally. They know that if things are bad, to reach out, but we do have you'll hear about some ongoing wellness going on at the police department to help with that. We have the same city employee help through the counselors and that sort of thing that every city employee has. But yeah, it is, they're the ones, they handle all of the every death, every serious crime, all of the homicides. They handle all of that. So they have quite a heavy lift there. But thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I forgot your name, sir.
My name is Ryan.
Oh, and thank you, Ryan, for the presentation. It was very informative. In driving through town, I often see, just as you're exiting downtown area where the speed limit changes, an area where there's some police cars that don't look like FPD police cars. Are those railroad police? And what is their relationship with FPD? How do you guys work together?
So there's only one railroad police officer that is stationed here, and he actually goes all over northern Arizona. So we have a very good relationship. It just so happens that he's married to one of our administrative directors. So we have a very good relationship with him, and we work with him constantly. Being only one person, he doesn't get much patrol. He simply responds. So if that answers the question,
it does.
We investigate it, but he's still out there on a lot of these. And there's also people from BNSF that respond every time. I don't know if she is on here, but there is the BNSF response every time that there is one of these collisions as well.
Can I follow up? So is there anything that BNSF is doing? Not anything that BNSF is doing, but what's their protocol for trying to keep people off the tracks?
Well, they had a lot of suggestions for us, and we're following through with a lot of that. You'll see some of the things that are being mentioned as some signs at certain locations. They across the country have had good. They've had good numbers of people who see someone standing near the train tracks or on the train tracks, and they're like, well, I don't know what's going on with that person. But if you put a sign there that has the number to our local response, then like, oh, that's what I need to do. BNSF, they have suggestions, and we're working with them. The solution to this is not just going to be us, but yeah, those train tracks have been here for a long time. I think their suggestion of fencing in certain places has helped. I know that the engineers are going to go into a little bit more detail on that, but that would help us quite a bit to be able to fence along those areas where we have pedestrian traffic that should not be a crossing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Christine Cameron, Capital Improvements Project Manager. And the next slide is for Sarah Logan. But first, I wanted to give you one more suggestion or example about what BNSF does. They provide services through Operation Lifesaver. It's a public outreach program, and so they'll come into and help us try to put out the message to the public. They also do some events here in town, so. And Sarah, are you on?
Good afternoon. How is everybody?
Good.
Okay, thank you for having me. Again, I'm Sarah Logan. I'm here representing the Federal Railroad Administration, and I cover Southern California and Arizona. So that's why this is important to me to be on and share this information. I wanted to start out, FRA's mission is to enable the safe, reliable, and efficient movement of people and goods for a strong America now and in the future. Our grade crossing division, our mission is to partner with stakeholders to mitigate grade crossing accidents and trespasser fatalities, investing in rail corridors, conducting research and developing technology, and issuing and enforcing safety regulations. As Jeff had said earlier, the Flagstaff Quiet Zone was a public authority designation. So what that means is they have, and it's an A3. So what that is they have supplemental safety measures at some of the crossings, not at all of the crossings. And as Jeff said, the Quiet Zone Risk Index is reduced to a level at or below the risk index with horns. The city needs to affirm that all of the signage, MUTCD signage, striping on the roads, all the railroad does their part, but they have to make sure and affirm that everything is as it was put in the notice of establishment. So we come out and we confirm all of that. The increase in incidents. So what happened is, as Lieutenant Dar said, there was 8 of them within a period of about 6 months. Okay, what was going on? And so as part of our regular inspection, we decided to do a site visit and come out and do it with the stakeholders. And while that was happening, we were able to, as Christine said and Jeff said, we were able to look at all the different aspects at these crossings, try to come up with different solutions to help mitigate the trespassing issue without costing a fortune and allow the city of Flagstaff to keep their quiet zone. Because as it is, we know that these incidents are happening. We need to know that you guys are making an effort to limit these incidents and protect the people of Flagstaff. Operation Lifesaver is a national organization that provides rail safety information. And they do videos, PSAs. I have worked with Sarah Langley and Christine to look at all of those different types of collateral that Operation Lifesaver has in order for them to pick out what fits best for the city of Flagstaff. And as I said, there is a deadline of February 28th to implement these safety mitigation efforts. We realize that sometimes the weather may hinder some of that progress, and we will hold a meeting to look at that progress, to make sure that it's moving in the right direction, to hopefully stave that quiet zone from being suspended until everything is done.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, as Jeff mentioned, yes, we've got several projects that are underway through the City of Flagstaff capital improvements that address rail safety around the corridor. The first one is the Downtown Mile Safety and Connectivity Project. It's right here south of downtown, or south of City Hall through our downtown area. We have 2 pedestrian tunnels going in, one in La Plaza Vieja, the Florence to Walnut, and we also have one at the Rio de Flag right south of City Hall that will connect City Hall with the future DCC building, the Mountain Line building. There's also enhanced bike and pedestrian improvements that are going in as we reconstruct the Milton Bridge right to the south of City Hall. Wider edge improvements for bicycles and pedestrians there. And we have at-grade crossing safety improvements at Beaver Street and San Francisco Street. And so Jeff mentioned that we have pedestrian and vehicular gates on the, at the approaches of those one-way streets, but we're actually going to be putting in quad gates, which means wrong-way traffic will also have their own gate. Because oftentimes with students or with tourists, you will see those wrong-way drivers. And sometimes they can get caught like on the, excuse me, on the crossing there. We also have fencing and signage that will go in to fill in some gaps, provide additional fencing to keep pedestrians, you know, from like veering off into the areas where the rail actually is. And we're working on a community rail safety plan with BNSF also. So construction, we're moving through design right now on the downtown mile, and construction will start in 2026. We also have the ADOT Section 130 projects. ADOT Section 130 is their rail crossing program with ADOT. They're stationed out of Phoenix, but they provided us grant monies to do fencing, signage, and lighting, and this is primarily at the Fanning crossing and at the Ponderosa Parkway crossing. And in addition, at Ponderosa Parkway, we'll have a northbound pre-signal for vehicles, and so any vehicles that's coming up north to the ADOT signal, they'll have to stop before they can queue onto that rail crossing area, because they oftentimes get hit there too. ADOT has just started design on these projects, and construction will start in 2026. And we also have the Lone Tree Overpass. So when the bridge is constructed, we'll have a grade separated crossing of the future Rio de Flag and BNSF Railway. They're in the middle of town, be very convenient. That also includes one of our foots trails over the bridge, and so that enhances that multimodal connectivity. There's also fencing, signage, and lighting around the rail corridor with that project. We are starting the corridor portion of the Lone Tree project here in the spring, but then the overpass will probably not start until 2026. So as Jeff and Sarah mentioned, you know, we have a lot of good projects in the works, but they're not coming along at the speed that we would like in order to help this trespassing issue. And so we've been working with FRA and BNSF to kind of pull some of those improvements that are going into the larger projects, kind of pull those forward and go ahead and get them underway. And that includes new and repaired fencing at the railroad crossings. And we'll also be doing some fencing around where the flow nut will be, but it is right now, there's a big area for trespassing. That chain link fence is cut, and so we'll be repairing that. And then some fencing around also the Rio, right south of City Hall. And then we also have the signage going in, the second train coming, and suicide crisis hotline signage. And so we're working with Kenny Construction under our JOC contract to go ahead and get them in the field and constructing these improvements. And they're scheduled to start roughly early February to get going. Yeah. So in addition to the outreach and education, or in addition to the engineering and enforcement portions that you've heard about tonight, we also have the outreach and education. And so that is something that Sarah Langley and her office is working on, and I will turn it over to her.
All right, thank you, Christine, and good evening again, Mayor and Council. Sarah Langley, Public Affairs Director. So the FRA and Sarah Logan have been very helpful in sharing key messages with us that they have found to be successful and effective in educating the public about the dangers of trains through their Operation Lifesaver program. So we are using that messaging here in Flagstaff to help educate our community. Some of the key messages that we're focusing on in our outreach campaign, the first is C-Tracks Think Train. So this really tries to help reduce accidents around the track. It tries to target that false belief that it may be okay to walk along the tracks or kind of hang out near them. Just kind of getting that message out there. The second is, actually wasn't aware of this myself, but the Find the Blue and White to Save a Life, or to Save Your Life. That's that blue and white sign that appears at all train crossings. That's been discussed previously this evening. But this can be used in several different situations. For example, if you are driving a vehicle and it stalls on the tracks, you can get out, of course, make sure no train is coming, but you can call that number to report the situation. Also, if you're just walking near a crossing and you see someone who's acting erratically, or maybe you're concerned about that person, you can also call that number and report the unique crossing ID, and that allows railroad operators to slow down or even stop trains in the area so that they can kind of be aware of potential situations. And then lastly, Operation Lifesaver has a lot of catchy safety-focused messaging that we'll be incorporating. Things like trains are faster and quieter than you think, or it can take up to a mile for a freight train to stop. So a bit about how we'll be doing this outreach. A key component will be using our community stakeholders and partners in the community. So reaching out to resource providers, especially those focused on behavioral health, like the care team, Taros Health, the Guidance Center, and others. We'd like to get them Operation Lifesaver materials so that they can share it with their clients. We also plan to reach out to shelters in town, Flagstaff Shelter Services, the CATS bus, and other places like food pantries to distribute materials. We plan to reach out to our Indigenous nations and tribal authorities that are nearby to see if there's any room for collaboration on the issue. And then lastly, some broad community outreach, which we've already begun. A social media campaign, we've done a few posts, but there'll be more to come, so feel free to share those posts on your personal or your accounts. Radio ads, these have been scheduled as of yesterday, so you should start hearing those on the airways shortly. Physical signage, as Christine mentioned, that'll be added. And then we're also looking into a geofencing campaign, which allows us to serve digital or radio ads to folks on their mobile devices who may be physically near a track. So that's something we're looking into as well. And I'll turn it back to Jeff. Thank you.
Sorry, Sarah, could you come back to the microphone? Councilmember House has a question.
Certainly, and apologies.
No, thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to ask, with I saw the signage with the suicide crisis hotline. Have those already been made, or are we going to use the 988?
We can tag team this one. The signs have not been made, and Sarah's message on, I think, one slide back, oops, went the wrong way. Find the blue and white, save your life. So we're currently working with the FRA about whether that sign, the suicide prevention sign, should be blue and white, because it may be confusing with this campaign that they use to find the report emergency signs. Oops. So we're working right now with FRA, Arizona Corporation Commission, BNSF, because the blue and white is actually the right color for from the MTCD, but we're working on that. So we haven't picked a color, so we haven't built the sign, and we're not using the 988 because Ryan told me.
We are not using 988 because it does not have the ability to be tracked. So if someone on a cell phone from California calls 988, it goes to California, and it does not go to our local call center. And that can be a considerable amount of rerouting. And so we use our local number. It goes to our dispatch center, and that's the fastest and easiest way to do it.
Okay, so is this going to be our local number? Because I thought this was the national number that was just replaced with 988.
This is not the number.
Okay.
We have the local number that we put on all of our stuff that goes to our dispatch center, and they dispatch for Taros and CARES, and so they're used to getting these, and they get them from BNSF as well. So they know exactly, even though the blue sign will have, mileposts with a bunch of numbers on it. Our dispatchers, they're really good about, okay, where are you? Tell me what you can see. Where's the cross street? How many feet are you? And then So they're really adept at getting a better location. 988, I just can't risk someone calling and it going to their home cell phone provider, and we have to reroute through everyone. It's just takes too much.
And wrapping up, so here's what we're up to next. Completing these interim improvements. So as Christine mentioned, fencing, signs, we've got some pavement markings, there's a whole slew of things. The cameras, the flock cameras are part of that package, so we're kind of racing on all fronts to get those in place as quickly as we can. We currently communicate with the FRA weekly. We send them essentially a weekly update email, and that's been going pretty well to show progress. It's neat. We are actually making good progress every week. Even over break, we were making some progress over the holidays. As Sarah Langley mentioned, media releases promoting safety has already happened, and radio ads are going out. Sounds like maybe even this week we'll start seeing some of that activity. Police department's aware of some of these locations. As Ryan mentioned, FRA has been really helpful with some of these targeted enforcement ideas. This one we hope we don't need to do, but we've committed if there is an incident. So Sarah Logan with FRA gets a report every day for her region for incidents that happened in the previous day, and she goes through those. And if we have an incident in our region, she'll reach out to me, and we're just gonna set up a call with all of these stakeholders and go through, what happened, what can be done. So hopefully we don't have to have that, but that's what we have set up. Obviously trying to meet this February 28th deadline, and we continue to pursue all of those long-range projects that Christine's working on, which are really big, cool projects, but just not quite quick enough for what we're dealing with today. So this was a discussion item. All of us are happy to answer questions. Really appreciate the team. That was fun, 5 of us. And there's more people, of course, working on this, but yeah, I told Joanne, it's a fun project. We're all racing to try to get some things done, which is always fun. So happy to answer any questions or more discussion.
Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you again for this presentation. In terms of the communication and the outreach to the shelters, the local community as well, we just had a question come across or around the dais about communicating with hotels and probably like the hostels downtown and things like that. Is that going to be part of that outreach as well?
I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, we can definitely include that. Councilmember House, thank you for raising that. We're hoping to get them posters and all sorts of physical materials that they can either display or pass out to customers or clients. So it's a great idea.
Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank Jeff and Sarah and the team, everyone working on this. I met with Shannon Anderson and the Chief of Police last month to discuss the concerns of the incidences on the railroad tracks and learned a lot of information there, but it's concerning to all of us every time we see it, and I can't even imagine the train conductors and the detectives that have to go out and do an investigation. It's got to be just the most horrific, traumatic thing to have to witness, and the trauma of someone deciding that, to end their life like that is just, it's hard for me to imagine. So I am really grateful that we are taking this so seriously and doing everything that we can to try to reduce. It would be great to eliminate, but at least try to reduce the number of incidences. So just thank you so much for everything.
Thanks.
Councilmember Garcia.
And I'm really just gonna kind of piggyback off that a little bit and say thank you for the presentation. I'm fairly new to the council, and when you come into running for election and things like that, you do it for so many different reasons. But these type of things here are the minutia that really keeps us all together. These are nonpartisan issues. Everybody in the community benefits from safety of the train tracks and things like that. This is my second meeting, but kind of feels like my first real meeting. And understanding these processes of the city, I just wanted to add some voice to it and say thank you from myself. And I also wanted to thank the community member that brought the question up, that we were able to add more advocacy and outreach to our underserved communities.
Thank you.
I have a question. What happens if we don't meet the February 28th deadline? Because as I understand it, our quiet zones are at risk.
Yes, our quiet zones are at risk, and Sarah, Logan may jump in, but what we were told in December when we kind of started racing was that we needed to get all these interim measures in place by February 28th. I heard Sarah tonight maybe say making really good progress would be good as well. She
Yes, so
unmuted.
as I should be, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So yes, you guys have been making great progress. And so what we will do is we'll come back to the table. We'll see where we're at, what still needs to be done, what has been completed, what has been implemented, and make a determination from there.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to take public comment. Margaret Novak.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm a little stressed, okay? I'm not used to talk in the public like this. But I would like to talk about establishing a quiet zone for the east side because the present wayside horns aren't quiet at all. They're very loud. I live in the Fox Glen area, over half a mile away from the tracks, but I can't leave my bedroom windows open at night because of the horns. And in summer, when I would like to cool my house down, that's a problem. We moved here in '84. The population was 30,000. The town has more than doubled in size, and so has train traffic. We now have about 100 trains coming through here in a 24-hour period. When the city designated downtown a quiet zone 20 years ago, the east side was placated with wayside horns that were supposed to be less noisy. But with the increase in train traffic came an increase in blaring horns. That far outweighed the lower decibel benefits of the wayside horns. There was a time nothing could be done to silence the horns. But now that we can, there are no good reasons not to do for the east side residents what was done for downtown. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Nichols.
Good evening, members of the council and Madam Mayor. My name is Matt Nichols, resident of Flagstaff at 3980 North Zurich Street. Congratulations to those newly elected council members. Former council member Jim McCarthy informed me of this agenda item on the quiet zones. It's an issue I've been following since 2010 when the quiet zones were implemented. My comments are related to the quiet zones, but they're not specific to what was presented tonight, which I appreciated hearing about the safety concerns, which I appreciated hearing the report and completely support the quiet zones or the safety issues. As the prior comment, the person that just made, my comment is also regarding the wayside horns on the east side. Since I didn't really know what tonight's quiet zone presentation was going to be about, I wanted to, I guess, bring back the attention and information to the council that in 2017, I initiated a citizens petition to quiet the east side, or to quiet the wayside horns at Fanning and Steve's. And that was 2017 through a citizens petition, and came before the board, or came before the council shortly after I submitted the petition. And in 2020, there was a favorable council report that came that came out to move forward in the 21 and 22 budget to do just that, to silence the wayside horns at the Fanning at the Fanning and Steve's crossings. I'm guessing there's been some issues that stopped that because it hasn't happened. And I'm curious what that was that stopped that, because I haven't heard anything to that, and that's, it's been quite some time. Perhaps it's, I know there were some issues with, the amount of feet, the median and that sort of thing. But my understanding was that was going to be able to be, worked with. Because there are, as the lady said before me, there are some real issues with noise pollution with the wayside horns. I mean, they are quieter than the horns, but they certainly are not, these are not quiet zones by any means. So I'm hoping we can find some solution and balance between safety and also, quality of life for the residents on the east side. I live in the neighborhood of Swiss Manor, and there's something about, being up close to the mountain and the certain weather that it's quite unbearable. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. And I realize we have an online commenter, but I'm wondering whether Jeff could just share with us about this 2020 council wanting to move forward and impediments to having no horns on the east side?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I slightly mentioned it earlier in my presentation. So the Steves and Fanning quiet zones are wayside horns, the 92 decibel horns at 100 feet, and they are certainly more noise than no noise, like the Ponderosa Parkway, Beaver, and San Francisco Street. That project has been in our budget for a couple of years, and we haven't had capital project managers to work on it. It's actually in our budget this year, and we're using that funding right now to do this quick project. And it's also in fiscal next year. So kind of the project was broken up into 2 years. I have to work with Trevor and Paul on getting a project manager program, but they are finally getting capital back to a reasonable staffing level. And so, yeah, it's in there, it's in our budget, and we've just had to roll it the last several years because we haven't had people to work on it, but it's there.
So it is moving forward.
It will be moving forward, yes. It's not moving forward at the moment, but it will be.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Spence.
I have a question for anybody that can address this. If there were no wayside horns at Fanning or Steve's, am I correct in assuming that we would then have train horns at 110 decibels instead of a wayside horn at 90 decibels?
Thank you. You're correct. If we did not have the wayside horns, we would have the locomotive horns quarter mile out running all the way down to the tracks as you hear them sometimes today. Decibel level, we set the wayside horns just above the 92 minimum. Train horns, each of them come through a little bit differently. They're allowed to go up to 110. They typically are quite a bit higher than 92, but I wouldn't say they're all 110. That'd be only clarification to your statement.
Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just remember when I was a kid growing up here and stuff, and I wanted to kind of add a little context to David's or Councilmember Spence's comment in that it was wild back then. So the quiet zones I appreciate, because you would hear sometimes, people playing games with the horns conductors, probably saying hello to each other, or you just heard horns wildly throughout the town that reverberated throughout the night at all hours of the night. So I appreciate the quiet zones. I really hope that we can keep them. As much as I do appreciate the public comment and to see what we can do to help mitigate and help the community's noise pollution as well. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and take online public comment.
We have a commenter, Alexander Schenken. Alexander, you can go ahead and address council.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Thank you for listening. My name is Alex Schenken. I'm an assistant research professor here at Northern Arizona University. I live in Ponderosa Trails. And I found this a fascinating meeting. Actually, I didn't know that we had lobbyists. How cool. And maybe a bit more on that in a second. But briefly, I wanted to mention that there are some noise issues in Flagstaff, and they're not all about trains. I'm here in Ponderosa Trails, and the freeway comes by here, and I'm actually set back quite a far way, but there is a constant drone of freeway noise, occasionally punctuated by semi-engine brakes coming through. Seems to vary somewhat on the temperature, how much we hear it, but this is pollution, and it affects not only residents and the quality of life here, but it also affects wildlife. There are plenty of academic studies showing that birds, certain birds and other wildlife are repelled by noise. And so it's kind of a silent pollution in a sense, even though it's noise. We think that it's not doing much other than being annoying, but actually it can have a really negative effect on residents and the biodiversity around here. I think it would be reasonable to request some measurements be done and a study to see what the noise levels are around here and what could potentially be done about it. It really does affect the quality of life negatively. So I'll leave that piece there. Thank you for your attention on that one. Regarding the lobbyists and so on,
Excuse
here
me.
at NAU,
Excuse me.
along with some
Excuse me,
Flagstaff
Alexander.
residents
You
who
need
are
to.
really good at what they do, we are putting together a $50 million grant to FEMA BRIC to launch.
Sorry about the muting, but
Low Earth orbit satellites to detect fire.
Mr. Schenken.
This is with cameras that have been developed.
yes, apologies again, but public comment on this item is what we're taking right now, and so we can't accept public comment from a previous item. Do we have additional public comment online?
No, Mayor, that was the only one.
Okay, thank you. Council, any additional questions before we move on? Okay, thank you, all of you. All right, so we are moving down to City Council liaison assignments. And I think what I would like to do, and I didn't check in with Stacy about how this should run, but I think I'd like to know from continuing council members, whether there are any commissions that they would like to step off of. What do you think about doing it like that?
We could, Mayor, Council, Stacy Salzberg, I'm the Communication and Civic Engagement Director, also serve as your city clerk. We can do it however you would like to, Mayor. I do have a couple of comments, if I might.
Please.
And then we can maybe see how we want to run through this document. So this is more for the benefit of our new council members, just to kind of understand what's before you tonight. But members of the city council are asked to participate as liaisons on a variety of community boards and groups. Participation within these groups is really advisory in nature and helps to foster communication about issues and projects that are happening here in Flagstaff. In addition to the community groups, you as council have a series of boards and commissions that also have a city council member liaison assigned to them. The liaison's responsible for sharing information with the commission, as well as reporting back to the council on the work that's being done by these various commissions. A great example of that is what we heard during the council liaison reports earlier in our meeting, where council members that serve in these capacities are sharing the work
that's being done. Again, the goal is to really be advisory, to kind of provide some perspective, and then to also enhance that communication both between the commissions, the council, and the public. And then finally, this is actually an addition. We have not talked about the policy committees with the Arizona League of Cities and Towns in the past, so this is an addition this year. But there are, I believe there's 5 policy committees at the league that review a variety of issues. These committees are made up of representatives from each city and town in Arizona. There's an application process that an interested council member may, that has to go through to be selected to one of these committees. But your role on that kind of arena is to advise the league on our position as it relates to those various issues that come before them. I wanted to just really briefly call out, I'm going to scroll down here slightly. I did have an error in the document that was provided to you with regards to the Metro Plan, or FMPO. Their meeting dates are actually the first Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. This is slightly different than what was initially included in your packet. So just take note of that. And Mayor, again, I'll defer to you on how you want to run through this. But I'm happy to go through these each. I have noted on what's on the screen here who is currently serving on these particular boards, commissions, etc. And we can kind of discuss if that would continue or look to make a change.
Thank you. I think unless there is any opposition to doing this, I would like to just run through and see which commissions a council member might be ready to step off of, so that we know which ones are up for grabs, so to speak. And I want to thank staff. I asked staff to make sure that council was aware of all of these committees that the league has, and I've been serving on the Neighborhood Sustainability and Quality of Life committees since I was first elected as a city council member, and I'm continuing on that. So, I'm looking at it in 2 different places. So are we all okay with that? Rather than going through every single commission, if we have council members that want to stay on it, then we don't need to talk about it, I guess, unless there's a fight. So, council members, we know that any seat that was occupied by Council Member McCarthy or Council Member Harris, you'll see a blank there because they were the representatives. Are there any commissions that you would like to step off of? Okay, so then let's move down to
Mayor, real fast.
Yeah.
Just a note for Stacy, it's not the Colorado Plateau Water Advisory Council, it's Coconino.
Apologies.
It's written correctly down below.
Oh.
It's probably just a typo, no worries.
Yes, thank you.
So the first open is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and I had been the alternate. I would like to step into that 3rd seat, and we don't really vote on this. We just kind of indicate what we're interested in, but I think that was the only change that I saw. Was there another council member who was interested in stepping onto the FMPO?
I was Mayor Daggett, but I don't need, I think I could still attend those meetings virtually, or I could become the alternate to those. I could still maintain advocacy from outside of the meeting.
Okay, so you would be willing to step in as alternate?
I would love that, thank you.
Okay. All right, and then Mountain Line. Now, there's a quorum issue, right, on FMPO and Mountain Line? Am I correct?
Mayor, if I might.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So you bring up an excellent point, and thank you for that. These two organizations, so FMPO and Mountain Line, as you can see, there are designations for 4 members of council. FMPO has 3 with 1 alternate, and Mountain Line's got 2 with 2 alternates. So we do need to be very careful about how we approach these meetings, how we attend, how we interact with each other, as many of these issues do come back to council for action on. That doesn't mean we cannot fill the slots. Where it becomes particularly important to be aware of who's attending when and how frequently is in that alternate capacity. So for example, with the FMPO, it would be recommended that physical attendance at those meetings, probably the alternate shouldn't attend unless we know that one of the 3 is not going to be there. Mountain Line gives a little more flexibility because it's 2 and 2. But yeah, I think it's important to be aware of those and to be very cognizant of how that interaction occurs.
Vice Mayor Sweet.
Thank you, and I just want to clarify, I'm on both of those, and they do a good job of reaching out prior to the meeting, getting the who's attending, and making sure there's not a quorum issue.
Great, thank you. And so what if a council member wanted to just attend? That still raises if they're not participating in the meeting, that still raises the same concern for having a quorum of council at the meeting? Yes. So, okay. So if there would be to say it differently, if there would be a quorum of council, an alternate or just someone who was interested in the commission should not attend in order to avoid that quorum.
That would be recommended, yes.
Councilmember Matthews.
And I just want to add to that, with the Mountain Line, there's been 1 or 2, but still 1 or 2, that Councilmember Sweet and I could not attend, and it was in jeopardy of not having a board quorum, and they had to reschedule. And so the alternates on that Mountain Line is really critical that they are available and can serve, because it doesn't happen often, but it has affected Mountain Line's meetings when something is going on where both of us can't make it.
Thank you for that. So would our newest council members like to serve as the alternates on Mountain Line?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would be very interested in serving on the Mountain Line board, either as a official first rank or as an alternate, whatever is in the interest of Mountain Line board function.
Thank you. And same Councilmember Garcia?
Yes, I would love to serve on that board as an alternate, and yes, that's basically it.
Thank you.
And Mayor, I'm happy to alternate with the 2 alternates so they can get some experience in more activity on the board, and we can work that out between us.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, next up we have NACOG, the Northern Arizona Council of Governments, and it looks like we do not have an alternate. So who is interested in serving as an alternate? Councilmember House? Anyone else? Okay. Then we'll move down to NAMWA, and if someone would like to take the alternate spot from me, I don't think I've ever been needed to go. I mean, I know I've never been needed to go, but I'm willing to have someone else step into that role if they would like it.
I'm very interested in serving on some sort of water commission. So if this is the opportunity for that, that's fine. If there's another one that comes up that's better or that I can add more service to, I would appreciate that. Either or.
Okay, so let's go ahead and change that to Councilmember Garcia. Sister cities, Councilmember House is the representative, and I've been involved as well because I have to sign the agreements with our sister cities. But is there someone on council who would like to serve as the alternate?
I don't want to take all the alternates, but that was one specific one that I really wanted to be part of.
All right, let's do that. Okay, then we're down to the league policy committees. Councilmember Matthews indicated an interest in the budget, finance, and economic development. Is there anyone else who is interested in that? And we can have the discussion about who serves. So is there someone who would like to be an alternate? And it's not critical that there be an alternate for these.
And
Okay.
I did want to clarify just real quick, I apologize for the interruption. There is, like I said, an application process that you have to go through, you have to be selected. If there is more than one council member who wants to potentially be involved in these different committees, multiple can apply. Only one will be appointed, but that, again, just wanted for your awareness to know what that process looks like.
Thank you. Okay, general administration, human resources, and elections. And I also should say that we haven't had a representative on several of these, so if this isn't something that interests you, please don't feel compelled to do it just so that we have someone on it. Okay, moving down to transportation, infrastructure, and public works. Vice Mayor has indicated that she is interested in serving on this. Is there anyone else who would be interested in serving on it? Okay. Public safety, military affairs, and the courts. Okay. And then I'm interested in continuing with neighborhood sustainability and quality of life unless there's someone else who's interested in that.
Go ahead.
I'm interested in that one or could serve as an alternate, and if that one's not available, then I would be willing to apply for the General Administration, Human Resources, and Elections.
Okay. And I'm trying to think, do they have alternates on these?
We've got Sean Johnson online. He works really closely with this process. I'm going to defer to him. Sean.
There we go. Oops, sorry about that. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Let me try to get this working. Sean Johnson, Chief of Staff to the Mayor and Council. Mayor, Vice Mayor, they do have alternates, and I just wanted to remind the council, if somebody was to be picked in the process, which happens in March or April, then we would have that option to have an alternate, but there are alternates on there.
Okay, thank you. So would you like to be an alternate then for neighborhoods and sustainability and be the primary for general administration?
I would be interested in that, but I know Councilmember Garcia was about to speak on that one as well. So if your interest was primarily the neighborhood sustainability, I could just apply for general administration. I'm not going to fight you on that one.
No, not at all. It was a little late in the process, but I was curious of how you served on these ones. Did you have to move around the state? Did you just zoom in?
All of the meetings were online, and cities can bring proposals for resolutions to this committee, and which I probably should have started with this, can bring resolutions forward to the group. The group talks about them, and if the group decides to forward a resolution to the resolutions committee of the league, that happens. Sometimes there's a discussion and the majority of the committee doesn't want to forward a resolution. I mean, for instance, neighborhood sustainability and quality of life, we discussed a resolution about short-term rentals 2 years ago, and that was forwarded to the resolutions committee at the annual meeting of the League of Cities and Towns. But all of our meetings leading up to that were online.
And are they monthly or?
No, they're really as something comes up. At least the neighborhood sustainability and quality of life was, they're not regular meetings, they're just kind of called when there's something to talk about.
Okay, and with that, then I'll yield to Councilmember House, whatever you'd like to do. Anything that's left over, I'll jump in.
Okay. So alternate on neighborhoods and primary on general administration. And Sean will get you the information about applying to these. Okay, we're moving down to city commissions. We have a seat available on the airport commission. Who might be interested in that? Councilmember Matthews is interested. Is there another council member interested? All right. Then we have, and a couple of these I have to be on. You'll see. Library board, we have a position open on the library board. Councilmember House is interested. Anyone else? Okay. Moving down to the Open Spaces Commission. Is there someone interested in this? Councilmember Garcia and Councilmember Spence are both interested in this.
I'll remove my interest. I want to see David.
Okay. So Councilmember Spence on Open Spaces, Parks and Recreation Commission.
I apologize, Mayor. I'm just looking at the schedule on the library board, and I see that it meets at the same time as the Housing Commission. So I'm going to back off of that one
Okay.
if somebody else is interested.
Who is interested in serving on the library board?
I could do that.
All right, Councilmember Garcia. We've got Open Spaces, Parks and Recreation Commission.
I'll serve on that.
Is there anyone else who's interested in serving? All right. Transportation Commission. We have a seat open on that. Who is interested in serving on that commission? Councilmember Spence, anyone else? Councilmember Garcia. So we have a cage fight then in the middle here on the dais to decide.
And what I just realized is my intention is, Mr. Spence, would you enlighten us with what decade you were, like what year you were born or what decade you were born in?
Well, 1940.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, you can have whatever you'd like here because I want I want your time on council to be some of the best times of your life, really, moving forward.
Thank you, but nobody needs to defer to me because I'm an old man.
It wasn't necessarily that. It was because you remind me a lot of my dad, and when you said the time frame that you lived in, he recently passed, and I would just like to see him have everything that he wanted in his at the end of his run.
All right, so Councilmember Spence, welcome to the Transportation Commission. And I think, now, is there anything lingering that you wanted to say but you didn't say? Councilmember Matthews, Councilmember Garcia?
And I know the answer to this, but I just want to put it out there just in case there's a change of mind down the road. At some point, I really would like to be on the tourism board. I know Councilmember Ashland is not interested in giving that up, but I have a huge interest in that because it's the scope of kind of what my background is in bringing in tourism and economic development and stuff. So if ever a time when you want to take a break, let me know. I wish they had an alternate.
Thank you, yeah, we can talk about that in the near future.
Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia.
I have interest in water commissions and also transportation as well. And of course, if you ever feel like getting off the BPAC, that's where I was born and raised and spent a lot of time there. I also wanted to just speak to the overall process as well. Kind of been in these rooms for a little while, and I've seen the maturation. So when we first started coming to these meetings, if I remember correctly, the way that it was done was kind of freed up the space for new people to get new ideas and to kind of transfer, not on the top boards, but just the city commissions, to give people more experience. And every 2 years, you kind of circled out of those ones. And then now we're starting to see a different one. And I'll hope to be here long enough to see where it comes back to that again.
We're very selfish. I forgot to add something, Mayor, if I may. Anthony, Councilmember Ashland and I were talking, and you mentioned that you were interested in the water commissions. And I am willing to, if you want to be the alternate for the Coconino Plateau Advisory. It's a very interesting group, and if you would like to take that, I'm willing to give that up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes.
Councilmember House.
I believe there was an alternate available for the Alliance for the Second Century, and I was interested in that, if it was still open.
How do we typically, Greg, please.
Thank you. I don't know that there's any set protocol on this. We have frequently seen both the mayor and the vice mayor at those meetings, but I mean, you're free to, we need you there, Mayor, but we're free to designate somebody else to accompany you, but typically it's been the vice mayor.
Councilmember Sweet.
I have been attending those meetings, and as vice mayor, I would like to continue for a bit, and then we can talk about switching off.
I mean, we can talk outside right now if you like to, Vice Mayor. I'm just kidding. I am okay with that.
Meet
Thank
you in the parking lot.
Okay, thank you all. It's all right, final call for comments. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you that are new to some of these boards, the staff liaisons will reach out to you with scheduling appointments, kind of some introductory, introductions. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question before you close out? Just in terms of any horse trading that goes on outside the meeting, this isn't an official vote or anything. This is up for discussion anytime, all the time, right?
Yes, and if for some reason you find that your schedule doesn't allow you to attend these meetings, or you're having some difficulty with that, just let myself know. I'm happy to come back to council. We can have that discussion about, assigning somebody else to serve in that capacity.
Wonderful. Does that even need to happen at the dais? Is us doing this in public just sort of a formality?
I think it's important to do this in the public. I think it gives the opportunity for all 7 of you to collaborate and decide, who you want to represent the council on these, and just make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak up if there's an interest.
All right. Thank you very much, Stacy. All right, open call to the public. I do not see anything. All right. Oh. Great, thank you. Nadine Hart.
Good evening. I am here to speak to the gross mismanagement of the Aquaplex. One of the reasons I did not vote for this tax There's repeated abuse of employees being verbally and physically assaulted while working. Customers know they can get employees fired by complaining and writing emails. I myself, as a fitness instructor, had to resign. I was spit on, I was kicked, I was cursed at, I had to call the police because there was no administration on site because I feared for my safety. I was punished. The client, the customer, who is revered above all, was still allowed to enter the facilities. There was no suspension or revocation of his membership. It got to be too much. And when people who attended my classes complained, they were ignored. And again, I was isolated in a small room and treated like a prisoner. It was really stressful and upsetting, and I decided under that management, I could no longer be successful. Other employees are facing the same thing. Being afraid to leave your work, being afraid to go into the community is not okay. So current administration needs to do better. Let's see, SWAT has been called to the facility for someone locking themselves in one of the rooms. How scary for employees. Homeless people have collapsed, and staff is expected to clean up the vomit or feces smeared in bathrooms, again with no repercussions. Chemical pneumonia. There are employees who will permanently suffer from this because of the mismanagement of chemicals in the pool. Again, this is upper management not doing their jobs. Management is never present on Saturdays or holidays when it's at its peak, leaving college students to have to deal with these abuses and not having proper questions. If you are in charge, you have an obligation, you are paid by the city to be there and keep people safe. Firefighters, our firefighters did not feel welcome when they were getting their workout areas rejuvenated. I spoke to several of them with FAC. Well, that also excludes maybe some of our teachers and police officers because there is an appeal to the certain clientele that are there. It costs our city over $10,000 a month just to keep it open, and it was open during COVID. There are mandatory Sunday meetings for the reception staff, of which they meet for 30 minutes, and then we pay for an additional 2 hours for them to play volleyball. These meetings and this information could be provided during working hours. It has to stop, and Rebecca is never there, ever, ever there.
Thank you. Moving down to item number 12, informational items to from mayor, council, and staff, and future agenda item requests. I'm going to start with Councilmember Matthews.
I have nothing today, thank you.
Councilmember Garcia.
Nothing today.
Councilmember Aslan.
I think I'll leave it there.
Vice Mayor Sweet.
Just real quick, I wanted to give a thanks to staff, the DBA, the volunteer team that helped clean up the downtown after New Year's. It sure looked good the next day, so thank you.
Councilmember House.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Councilmember Spence.
Nothing, thank you.
City Manager.
Nothing from me, Mayor, thank you.
All right, thank you all for a productive meeting, and we're adjourned.